Hello guys, welcome to Ben 10 What Ifs. So in this video, we will see, what if Ben 10 discovered the void Omnitrix and fell in love with Charmcaster? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Blank, blank, underscore, blank. Chapter 1. The Void Between Worlds. The pale blue glow illuminated the ancient hieroglyphs as Ben Tennyson traced his fingers along the stone wall. 23 years old now, he'd long outgrown the impulsive heroics of his youth, replaced by a methodical confidence that came from a decade of safeguarding the universe. The narrow passage descended deeper beneath the Egyptian desert, the air growing thick with millennia of undisturbed dust. For the record, Ben called over his shoulder, "I still think Gwen should be here for the magical mumbo-jumbo." Professor Paradox's cryptic coordinates had led him to this forgotten temple. Not plumber business, not alien invasions, just an anomaly that the Time Walker had deemed particularly suited to your unique qualifications, young Benjamin. The Omnitrix on his wrist flickered briefly, its green glow momentarily pulsing in response to something. Ben paused, brow furrowing. After years as its wielder, he'd developed an almost symbiotic relationship with the device. That flicker wasn't normal. Azimuth mentioned nothing about magical interference patterns, Ben muttered, tapping the faceplate. The device remained unresponsive to his touch, yet continued emitting sporadic pulses. The passage widened suddenly into a vast circular chamber. Pillars carved from obsidian rose to support a dome ceiling. Where constellations unknown to Earth glittered in phosphorescent minerals. At the center stood a raised platform with a pedestal that seemed to absorb the surrounding light. Ben approached cautiously, years of experience having taught him that beautiful things in hidden temples were rarely benign. The pedestal contained a spherical depression, a perfect fit for something approximately the size of the Omnitrix. "Yeah, that's not suspicious at all," he remarked to the empty chamber, voice echoing. Still, Paradox wouldn't have sent him into mortal danger. Probably. The Omnitrix pulsed more frantically now, its green light shifting momentarily to violet before returning to normal. Ben felt a pulling sensation, as though the device itself wanted to approach the pedestal. Okay, he muttered. But if this is another universe-ending scenario, I'm taking a vacation after. Before his hand could reach the pedestal, a blast of magenta energy struck the stone floor inches from his feet. "Step away from the void seal, Tennyson." Quote. Ben didn't need to turn to recognize that voice, a contralto with sharp edges that had softened imperceptibly over the years. He smiled despite himself. "Charmcaster. Or do you prefer hope these days?" Quote. He turned to face the silver-haired sorceress. At 25, she'd grown into her power in ways that made her former teenage self seem like a pale imitation. Her traditional purple attire had evolved into an intricate battle mage ensemble of deep violet leather reinforced with silver runes. The magical bag at her hip now looked more like an arsenal than a toy. "That depends entirely on whether you're about to unleash interdimensional chaos," she replied, lowering her glowing hand marginally. "Do you have any idea what you're tampering with?" Ben gestured at the chamber around them. "Enlighten me. Paradox just said it needed my attention." Charmcaster's eyes widened. "Paradox sent you." She approached, boots clicking against the stone floor, her expression shifting from hostility to cautious interest. "The old Time Walker meddles more than he should. Tell me about it." Ben turned back to the pedestal. "So what's this void seal?" She stood beside him now, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of ozone and lilac that accompanied her magical presence. She'd always smelled like a thunderstorm about to break. "It's a containment street. Rupture for something my people call the void between worlds," she explained, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "A dimensional pocket where reality, Ben's magic and science blur together there." She studied his face with unexpected intensity. "Legend says it responds only to those who can change their form." Ben raised an eyebrow. "That's oddly specific." "Magic often is." Charmcaster traced a symbol in the air, sending motes of light dancing across the hieroglyphs. "These warnings speak of a weapon, or tool, called the Void Omnitrix." The device on Ben's wrist pulsed violently at the name, emitting a high-pitched whine that made them both wince. "I'm guessing that's not a coincidence," Ben said, examining the now erratic behavior of his Omnitrix. But Azimuth never mentioned anything about a void version. Perhaps he didn't make it, Charmcaster suggested, moving closer to examine the pedestal. These markings are older than Galvan's civilization. Before either could speculate further, the chamber trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling as a grinding sound echoed through the space. The pedestal began to rise, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Floating in a suspended Oni, Mashin field was what appeared to be an Omnitrix, but unlike any version Ben had encountered. Instead of green or red, it pulsed with a deep violet energy that seemed to bend the light around it. Its shape was more angular, the faceplate displaying unfamiliar symbols that shifted constantly. The Void Omnitrix, Charmcaster breathed, her professional detachment momentarily broken by wonder. Ben's own Omnitrix reacted violently, the faceplate spinning wildly before projecting a holographic message. Azimuth's miniature form appeared, looking uncharacteristically concerned. Ben Tennyson, if this recording has activated, you've encountered something I hoped would remain theoretical. The Void Omnitrix was my ancestor's greatest mistake, a prototype that could access dimensional frequencies beyond our universe. It was deemed too dangerous and buried in a pocket dimension. The hologram flickered. Do not allow it to merge with your Omnitrix. The power combine it. The message cut off abruptly. Ben and Charmcaster exchanged glances. Well, that's reassuring, Ben said dryly. When has too dangerous ever stopped you before? Charmcaster challenged, a hint of their old rivalry surfacing in her tone. I've grown up a bit since I was 10, Ben retorted, though he couldn't help the slight smile that formed. So what's your stake in this, Charmcaster? Tracking magical artifacts for fun now. She stiffened. Legerdemain is bleeding into other dimensions. The barriers are weakening. I traced the disturbance to this location. Her eyes narrowed. And it's hope to you. Hope, Ben corrected himself, noting how the name felt right somehow. So this thing might be causing dimensional problems. Before she could answer, a new voice echoed from the entrance to the chamber. It's not causing them, it's responding to them. Both turned to see a woman silhouetted in the passageway. She stepped forward, revealing tanned skin, intelligent eyes, and practical clothing covered in the dust of excavation. A plumber badge was clipped to her belt, though Ben recognized her immediately without it. Kai Green, he acknowledged with a nod. Interdimensional archaeologist now, I see. And you're still finding trouble, Ben Tennyson. Kai replied with a half smile, her gaze shifting to Charmcaster with professional curiosity. Hope, your reputation precedes you. Likewise, Charmcaster responded coolly. Kai approached the pedestal, pulling out a scanner that looked like plumber tech modified with components Ben didn't recognize. I've been tracking dimensional anomalies across 7 archaeological sites, she explained. Calibrating her device. The barriers between realities are thinning. This temple exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously, a nexus point. And the Void Omnitrix? Ben asked. A key, Kai said, scanning the floating device. Or possibly a lock. My research suggests it was created to repair dimensional breaches. The ground shook more violently this time. Cracks appeared in the ancient floor, and a faint purple light began to shine through them. Whatever we're deciding, we need to decide quickly, Charmcaster warned, her hands already glowing with defensive spells. The suspended Void Omnitrix pulsed in sync with the light emanating from the cracks. Ben felt his own Omnitrix heating against his skin, pulling toward its counterpart with increasing force. I don't think we have a choice anymore, Ben said grimly, bracing himself against the pull. The original Omnitrix suddenly detached itself from Ben's wrist, something that had never happened before, and flew toward the Void Omnitrix. The two devices collided in a blinding flash of green and purple energy. When the light faded, a single device hovered in the air. It resembled Ben's Omnitrix but was now sleeker, with angular patterns that pulsed between green and violet. Without warning, it shot toward Ben, clamping around his wrist. Pain unlike anything he'd experienced before, worse than any transformation, tore through him. It felt as though every atom in his body was being pulled apart and reassembled. He barely registered Charmcaster and Kai rushing to his side as he collapsed to his knees. Through gritted teeth, he managed to gasp, "Something's wrong, it's rewriting me." "Your DNA is the template for the Omnitrix," Charmcaster said urgently, her hands moving in complex patterns as S. He attempted to analyze the magical energy. The void version must operate on different principles. Dimensional principles, Kai added, scanning frantically. It's not just accessing alien DNA, it's accessing alternate versions of yourself across realities. Ben couldn't respond. His vision blurred as images flashed before his eyes. Thousands of alternate Bens, living different lives, making different choices. He saw versions where he remained a hero, others where he became a villain, worlds where he never found the Omnitrix, and realities where he ascended to cosmic power. The chamber around them began to dissolve, reality itself seeming to bend and warp. The purple light from the cracks intensified, enveloping them completely. It's creating a dimensional rift. Kai shouted over the deafening rumble. Charmcaster grabbed Ben's shoulders. Fight it, Tennyson. Focus on who you are in this reality. Ben struggled to center himself amidst the cascade of alternate lives flooding his consciousness. He focused on the pressure of Charmcaster's hands on his shoulders, on Kai's voice nearby, on the solid stone beneath his knees. I'm Ben Tennyson, he managed, each word a struggle against the void pulling at his identity. Wielder of the Omnitrix, protector of Earth, this universe. The merged Omnitrix gave a final pulse, and the pain suddenly subsided. Ben gasped, his vision clearing to reveal nothing he recognized. The temple chamber was gone. In its place stretched a vast landscape of floating islands and twisted spires of purple stone. The sky above them swirled with colors no human eye was meant to process. Crystalline trees grew upside down from hovering earth masses, their branches reaching toward an impossible horizon where multiple suns of different colors hung motionless. Legerdemain, Charmcaster whispered, her voice a mixture of reverence and dread. But, wrong, changed. Ben looked down at the device on his wrist. It had stabilized into a sleek design that combined elements of his various Omnitrixes over the years. The faceplate displayed unfamiliar alien silhouettes intermixed with his standard transformations. The Void Omnitrix, he murmured. It brought us here. Not exactly, Kai said, examining her scanner with a frown. According to these readings, we're in a pocket between dimensions. A fraction of Legerdemain overlapping with at least 3 other realities. Charmcaster moved to the edge of the floating island they stood upon, her expression grim as she surveyed the twisted landscape. The dimensional bleeding is worse than I feared, she said. This isn't just Legerdemain, it's fragments of multiple magical dimensions forced together. She turned back to Ben. Your new toy might have accelerated the process. Ben stood shakily, still adjusting to the sensation of the Void Omnitrix. It felt heavier somehow, as though carrying the weight of multiple realities within its mechanisms. Or it responded to an existing problem, he countered, rolling his shoulders. Either way, we need to figure out how to stabilize things before Earth gets pulled into whatever this is. A distant roar echoed across the fractured landscape, followed by the sounds of crumbling stone and displaced magic. Company, Kai warned, drawing a weapon that appeared to be a modified plumber blaster with ancient symbols etched along the barrel. Ben raised his wrist, studying the new interface. Let's see what this thing can do. He activated the faceplate, finding the holographic display more responsive than ever before. The alien silhouettes seemed to shift and change as he scrolled through them, some familiar, others completely new. He selected one that resembled Swampfire and slammed his hand down. The transformation felt different, deeper somehow, as though he was changing not just his physical form but his place in reality itself. Green energy spiraled with violet as his body morphed. When the light faded, Ben stood as a version of Swampfire he'd never experienced before. His plant-like body was now interwoven with crystalline structures that pulsed with dimensional energy. When he generated fire in his palm, it burned with a RPLE green flame that seemed to bend the air around it. Void fire, he said, his voice carrying an echo that seemed to come from multiple points in space simultaneously. That's new. Charmcaster stared at him with undisguised fascination. The Void Omnitrix isn't just accessing alien DNA, it's accessing variants of those aliens from across dimensions. Before Ben could respond, the source of he roaring appeared around a floating spire, a creature that resembled a stone golem but with components from different realities merged into its form. Parts of it were constructed from Legerdemain's magical rock, while others consisted of technological components, crystalline structures, and what appeared to be living tissue. Dimensional hybrid, Kai called out, already taking aim. They're becoming more common at breach points. The creature spotted them and charged, leaping between floating islands with surprising agility for its massive size. Ben, as void fire, moved with instinctive precision, his combat experience melding with the new abilities of this enhanced form. He launched streams of dimensional flames that didn't just burn the creature but seemed to temporarily phase parts of it out of existence. Charmcaster flanked left, her hands weaving complex patterns that summoned chains of magenta energy. Its core is unstable, she shouted. We need to separate the dimensional components. Kai provided covering fire, her modified blaster emitting pulses that slowed the creature's movements by affecting its temporal field. Ben, can you generate enough heat to force a reaction in its core? Working in seamless coordination that belied their complicated history, the three engaged the dimensional hybrid. Ben found himself impressed by both women's capabilities. Charmcaster was no longer the impulsive spellcaster he'd known years ago but a masterful sorceress with precise control and strategic thinking. And Kai had evolved from the headstrong girl he'd once crushed on into a formidable specialist who combined archaeological knowledge with combat prowess. Ben focused the dimensional flames into a concentrated beam aimed at the creature's core, a swirling vortex of energy visible through cracks in its chest. The hybrid roared in pain, its form beginning to destabilize. Now, Hope, Ben called out, instinctively using her preferred name. Charmcaster thrust both hands forward, sending her energy chains directly into the exposed core. With a precise incantation spoken in a language that seemed to twist in the air, she began separating the merged energies. Kai, containment, Ben shouted, maintaining the beam despite feeling the strain on his new form. Kai activated a device from her belt that projected a field around the destabilizing creature. Hold it steady. 3 more seconds. With a final, reality-bending shriek, the hybrid collapsed into separate components, each returning to its original dimensional frequency before fading from view. Ben released the transformation, returning to human form with a flash of violet-green light. The process felt smoother than his standard transformations, leaving him less disoriented. That was, he started. Impressive, Charmcaster finished, a reluctant note of respect in her voice as she approached. Your new form manipulated dimensional energy almost like native magic. The void Omnitrix must allow you to access dimensional variants of your aliens. Kai theorized, holstering her weapon. Potentially unlimited combinations. Ben examined the device, noticing subtle changes in its interface. It feels different, like it's connected to more than just DNA samples. I could sense different versions of Swampfire across multiple realities. A tremor shook the floating island beneath their feet, reminding them of their precarious situation. We need to find stable ground, Kai said, consulting her scanner. There's a larger landmass about half a kilometer east that shows consistent readings. I know this region, or what it used to be, Charmcaster added, pointing toward a distant tower that spiraled impossibly upward. That's the Observatory of Ages. If any structure in Legerdemain would have information about dimensional stability, it's there. Ben nodded, already accessing the void Omnitrix again. I'll get us there. Let's try something with wings this time. He selected what appeared to be a variation of Big Chill and transformed. The resulting alien resembled the moth-like cryokinetic form he was familiar with, but now with multiple sets of wings that seemed to phase partially into different dimensions. His body emitted a cold that felt fundamental, as though freezing reality itself rather than merely temperature. Void Chill, he announced, his voice resonating across multiple frequency ranges simultaneously. Everyone hold on. He extended 4 arms, 2 more than his standard Big Chill form possessed, allowing both women to secure themselves. As they took flight across the fractured landscape of merged realities, Ben found this form could navigate the dimensional inconsistencies with intuitive ease, passing through reality fluctuations that would have torn normal matter apart. Below them, the fragmented realm of Legerdemain stretched out in broken patterns. Islands of purple stone floated at impossible angles, some containing structures Ben recognized from previous visits. Theirs featuring architecture from dimensions he'd never seen. Rivers of golden energy flowed upward, cascading into floating lakes that defied conventional physics. Throughout it all, tears in reality revealed glimpses of other worlds bleeding through, here an alien cityscape, there a primordial forest, elsewhere a void of stars arranged in unnatural patterns. The boundaries are breaking down faster than I anticipated, Charmcaster observed, her expert gaze assessing the deteriorating dimensional integrity. These weren't just random merges, something is deliberately weakening the barriers. Or someone, Kai added grimly. The patterns suggest intelligence behind the breaches. They approached the observatory tower, which stood impossibly tall, its upper portions seeming to bend into different dimensional frequencies. As they neared, Ben noticed figures moving along its spiraling exterior walkways, humanoid but with limb proportions that suggested non-human origin. "We've got company," he warned, adjusting their flight path to approach from a less visible angle. Charmcaster tensed. "Those aren't legerdemain natives. Their magical signature is wrong. Dimensional refugees, maybe," Kai suggested. "Beings displaced by the merging realities." Ben landed them on an external platform halfway up the tower, where they could observe without being immediately spotted. He reverted to human form, the void Omnitrix recalibrating with a soft pulse of energy. "If they're refugees, they might be allies," Ben reasoned, peering around a curved wall at the strange beings moving about the tower. "If not, we handle it," Charmcaster finished, magic already dancing between her fingertips. The confidence in her voice wasn't arrogance, Ben recognized it as the earned certainty of someone who had fought countless battles and emerged stronger. Kai checked her equipment with methodical precision. "Let's gather intelligence first. I can set up perimeter scanners to analyze their dimensional signatures." Ben nodded, impressed by their professional approach. These weren't the girls he'd known years ago, they were accomplished women with expertise that complemented his own abilities. As Kai deployed her scanners, Charmcaster moved closer to Ben, her voice lowering. "That device on your wrist, it's changing you," she observed, studying him with piercing eyes. "I can sense dimensional energy integrating with your natural mana. Your baseline human form is already adapting." Ben flexed his hand, realizing she was right. He felt different, more attuned to the subtle variations in reality around them. "Is that dangerous?" "Everything powerful is dangerous," she replied with a hint of her old sardonic humor. "The question is whether you can control it before it controls you." Their conversation was interrupted by Kai's urgent whisper. "Movement. 3 hostiles approaching this platform." They pressed back against the tower wall as 3 figures emerged onto the platform. Up close, their inhuman nature became more apparent, humanoid in basic structure but with skin that shifted colors like oil on water, and too many joints in their elongated limbs. Their eyes were multifaceted like insects, reflecting light in prismatic patterns. More concerning was what they were discussing in a language that somehow shifted between comprehensible and utterly alien mid-sentence. "Master R. Equires the reality anchor before the next convergence. The human with the dimension device must be located. Lord Hex will not tolerate failure." At the mention of Hex, Charmcaster stiffened beside Ben. Her uncle's name was clearly the last thing she expected to hear in this fractured reality. The beings moved past their hiding spot, continuing along the platform and entering the tower through a doorway that seemed to bend inward at impossible angles. Once they were gone, Charmcaster turned to the others, her expression grim. "If my uncle is involved in this dimensional crisis, the situation is worse than I feared," she said. "Hex has been obsessed with expanding Legerdemain's influence since he first accessed it. Could he be responsible for the dimensional breaches?" Ben asked. "Not directly." Charmcaster shook her head. "Even at his most powerful, Hex couldn't affect multiple dimensions simultaneously. But if he's found a way to harness the natural deterioration of the boundaries, or accelerate it," Kai added, consulting her scanner, "these readings suggest the breaches aren't just random failures, they're being systematically weakened at specific points." Ben considered this information, the tactical part of his mind, developed through years of alien encounters and universal threats, already formulating approach options. "We need to get inside that observatory," he decided. "If it has the information you mentioned about dimensional stability, it might tell us how to stop this before more realities start bleeding together. And we need to find out what Hex is planning with this reality anchor," Charmcaster added, her personal stake in confronting her uncle evident in the intensity of her gaze. They moved toward the doorway the beings had used, finding it Warped in ways that human architecture never could be, the entrance seemed to simultaneously exist in multiple spatial configurations, overlapping itself in reality. Dimensional phasing, Kai murmured, scanning the doorway. It exists across multiple realities at once. Can we pass through safely? Ben asked, already checking the void Omnitrix for suitable transformations. Charmcaster stepped forward, her hands weaving a pattern in the air that left traces of magenta light. I can stabilize it temporarily. My magic is attuned to legerdemain's frequency. As she worked her spell, Ben found high MSELF watching her with newfound appreciation. The determined set of her jaw, the precise movements of her fingers manipulating complex magical energies, the confidence in her stance, all spoke of the master sorceress she'd become in the years since they'd last crossed paths. The doorway shimmered and seemed to settle into a single configuration, still strange by Earth standards but at least consistent in its dimensions. It's stable, Charmcaster announced, but only for a few minutes. They passed through the entrance into a vast interior space that defied the tower's external dimensions. The observatory's central chamber stretched impossibly far in all directions, with spiraling staircases that connected floating platforms holding ancient instruments and crystal arrays. The ceiling, if it could be called that, opened to a view of multiple overlapping skies, each belonging to a different dimension. This is incredible, Kai breathed, her archaeological passion momentarily overriding her professional caution. This observatory was built to monitor multiple dimensions simultaneously. These instruments, they're calibrated to track reality fluctuations. Ben moved carefully along a crystalline walkway, noting with concern that parts of the observatory were deteriorating, sections fading in and out of existence as the dimensional instability progressed. We need to find the central archive, Charmcaster said, pointing toward a domed structure suspended in the center of the vast space. That would contain the historical records and dimensional maps. As they navigated the bizarre interior architecture, Ben noticed something strange about the void Omnitrix. The device was pulsing in a rhythm that seemed to correspond with certain crystal arrays they passed, as though communicating with the ancient technology. The Omnitrix is interacting with this place, he whispered to the others. Like it recognizes the technology. Kai studied the nearest crystal array with professional interest. These aren't just monitoring devices, they're stabilizers. They're actively trying to maintain dimensional integrity. And failing, Charmcaster added grimly, pointing to where a section of T. He observatory was dissolving into multicolored energy. They reached the central archive, a spherical chamber suspended by impossible physics in the heart of the observatory. Its walls were lined with crystalline data storage unlike anything on Earth, pulsing with information in patterns too complex for human minds to naturally process. Charmcaster immediately moved to what appeared to be a control interface, her hands hovering over symbols that shifted and changed as she observed them. This is ancient magic tech, she explained, her fingers tracing patterns in the air that caused responding symbols to glow brighter. Legerdemain scholars created hybrid systems that merged magical principles with technological applications. Can you access the records? Ben asked, keeping watch for any returning dimensional beings. I can try, she responded, her brow furrowing in concentration. My uncle taught me some of these old systems before. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Ben knew enough of her history with Hex to understand the complicated relationship, mentor and tormentor, family and enemy. As Charmcaster worked, Kai moved to another section of the archive, examining what appeared to be three-dimensional maps of overlapping realities. These show the progression of the dimensional bleeding, she said, her trained eye quickly analyzing the patterns. It started months ago, with minor incursions, but has accelerated dramatically in the past week. The void Omnitrix pulsed more insistently, drawing Ben's attention. Almost instinctively, he placed his wrist against one of the crystal interfaces. The device immediately established a connection, projecting holographic displays of information too fast for him to consciously process. It's downloading something, he said, feeling the Omnitrix warming against his skin. Charmcaster looked up sharply. Ben, wait, her warning came too late. The crystal array flashed brilliantly, and suddenly the archive chamber was filled with holographic projections of multiple dimensions layered over each other, Earth, Legerdemain, and dozens of others Ben didn't recognize. It's a dimensional map, Kai realized, moving closer to examine the projection. It shows all the current breaches and weak points. The map revealed an alarming pattern. Breach points were concentrated around specific nexus locations, forming a pattern that couldn't be coincidental. Someone is deliberately targeting dimensional weak points, Ben said, his years of tactical experience immediately recognizing the strategic placement. This isn't random deterioration. Charmcaster had managed to access another section of the archive, her expression growing increasingly troubled as she read the ancient text. According to these records, something similar happened millennia ago, she said. A catastrophic event called the Convergence, where multiple dimensions began to collapse into each other. How was it stopped? Kai asked, the practical question. On cutting to the heart of their problem. With a device called the Reality Anchor, Charmcaster replied, her eyes widening with realization. The same artifact those beings mentioned. It was create to stabilize dimensional boundaries when they become compromised. Ben studied the map more closely, noting a pulsing point at its center. And let me guess, it's located here, in the observatory. It was. Came a new voice from behind them. Until I removed it, they spun to find a tall figure in ornate robes standing in the archive entrance. Though his face was partially obscured by a hood, staff he carried, topped with a bird-like skull, was unmistakable. Uncle, Charmcaster said, her voice a complex mixture of emotions. Hex stepped forward, his ageless face bearing the familiar crimson markings that signified his mastery of dark magic. But something was different. Veins of shifting dimensional energy now intermingled with those markings, suggesting he had absorbed power from the reality breaches. Hope, he acknowledged with cold formality. Still keeping regrettable company, I see. His gaze shifted to Ben, narrowing as he observed the void Omnitrix. Though you've acquired something of genuine interest, Tennyson. Ben positioned himself protectively between Hex and the women, though a quick glance confirmed both Charmcaster and Kai were already prepared for conflict, neither needing his protection. What are you doing with the reality anchor, Hex? Ben demanded. These dimensional breaches are threatening every reality, including legerdemain. A thin smile crossed Hex's face. Threatening, or transforming, evolution requires chaos before new order can emerge. You're accelerating the dimensional collapse, Charmcaster realized, horror and anger mingling in her voice. You're trying to merge the dimensions permanently. Not merge, Hex corrected, raising his staff. Reshape. When the boundaries fall completely, the reality anchor will allow me to reconfigure the dimensional boundaries as I see fit. A new multiverse with legerdemain at its center, and myself as its architect. That's insane, Kai interjected. The dimensional collapse will destroy countless realities before you could possibly stabilize them. A necessary sacrifice, Hex replied dismissively. Creation requires destruction. Ben had heard enough. He activated the void Omnitrix, cycling quickly to find an appropriate form. Not happening, Hex. He slammed down on the faceplate, transforming into a dimensional variant of Diamond Head. This version had crystals that shifted between states of matter, sometimes solid, sometimes seeming to exist as pure energy. Void Diamond, Ben announced, his crystalline form refracting light in impossible patterns. Hex responded immediately, slamming his staff against the floor and sending a wave of dimensional energy outward. The archive chamber distorted around them, sections phasing in and out of reality. You fail to comprehend what you're interfering with, Hex snarled. The convergence is inevitable now. I am merely ensuring legerdemain survives as the dominant reality. Charmcaster countered her uncle's spell with a shield of mage. NTA energy that stabilized the space around them. You taught me to respect the boundaries between worlds, she said, anger making her magic flare brighter. Now you're tearing them down for power. Quote, I taught you many things you chose to ignore, Hex replied coldly, engaging her in a direct magical duel that filled the chamber with competing energies. Ben moved to flank Hex while Kai provided supporting fire from her position. Her weapon adjusted to counter dimensional fluctuations. The battle quickly escalated, with Hex demonstrating mastery of dimensional magic that exceeded anything Ben had seen from him before. Using Void Diamond's unique properties, Ben created crystalline structures that temporarily stabilized sections of reality the battle was destabilizing. He found this variant foe could interact directly with the dimensional fabric, reinforcing weakened boundaries. The reality anchor, Ben called to Charmcaster between attacks. Can you sense where he's keeping it? Charmcaster deflected another of her uncle's spells before closing her eyes momentarily, extending her magical senses. It's not here, she realized. He's channeling its power from somewhere else. Hex laughed, a cold sound that echoed strangely in the distorted space. Perceptive as always, niece. The anchor is safely positioned at the primary convergence point, already beginning its work. A massive tremor shook the observatory, more violent than any previous disturbance. Sections of the structure began to dissolve completely as reality itself strained under the increasing pressure of merging dimensions. We're out of time, Kai shouted, her scanner displaying critical warnings. The primary convergence has started. Hex used their momentary distraction to summon a portal behind himself. Witten's the birth of a new dimensional order, he proclaimed before stepping backward through the swirling gateway. Ben lunged toward the portal but was too late, it collapsed before he could reach it. He reverted to human form. The void Omnitrix recalibrating with an urgent pulse. We need to find that convergence point, he said, turning to Charmcaster. Can you track him? She nodded grimly. I can follow his magical signature. But we'll need to move quickly. Once the dimensions reach critical convergence, not even the void Omnitrix will protect us from the collapse. Another violent tremor rocked the observatory. Platforms began falling into a growing void at the center of the structure as reality itself unraveled. This place is coming apart, Kai warned, already moving toward the exit. Whatever we're doing, we need to do it elsewhere. Ben accessed the void Omnitrix again, this time selecting a variant of XLR8 that appeared to have energy-based components intermingled with its physical form. Void velocity, he announced after transforming, his new form vibrating at frequencies that allowed him to perceive multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. I can get us out of here. He gathered Charmcaster and Kai, his enhanced speed now augmented with the ability to phase through dimensional distortions. As the observatory collapsed around them, Ben navigated through reality fluctuations that would have torn normal matter apart. They emerged onto a floating island some distance from the crumbling tower. From this vantage point, they could see the full extent of the dimensional catastrophe unfolding across Legerdemain. Massive tears in reality revealed glimpses of Earth, the null void, and countless other dimensions bleeding together. At the center of it all, a swirling vortex of energy was forming, the primary convergence point. There, Charmcaster pointed. That's where he's taken the anchor. Ben reverted to human form, studying the distant vortex. How do we stop it once we get there? Charmcaster's expression was grim but determined. The reality anchor was designed to stabilize dimensions, not collapse them. If I can reverse Hex's modifications, you'd need to get close enough first. Kai pointed out, her practical nature cutting to the immediate problem. The void Omnitrix pulsed, drawing Ben's attention. The device seemed to be offering a solution, new alien forms appearing in its holographic display that he'd never seen before. I think I have an idea, Ben said, studying one particular silhouette that the Omnitrix was highlighting. But it's going to be risky. Riskier than the collapse of all reality? Charmcaster asked with a raised eyebrow and the ghost of a smile. Point taken, Ben acknowledged, returning the smile briefly before growing serious again. We need to work together on this. Hex is more powerful than ever with the dimensional energy he's absorbed. Kai checked her remaining equipment. I can create a temporary Dimensiona L stabilizer field once we reach the convergence point. It won't last long, but it might give you the time you need. And I can counter my uncle's magic, Charmcaster added. I know his techniques better than anyone. Ben nodded, a plan forming. Then let's save reality. Again, as they prepared to make their approach to the convergence point, Ben found himself studying Charmcaster with newfound appreciation. Throughout this crisis, she'd demonstrated not just magical mastery but a depth of character he'd only glimpsed in their previous encounters. Her determination to stop her uncle despite their complicated history spoke to a strength he admired. For her part, Charmcaster caught his gaze and held it for a moment longer than necessary, a complex emotion flickering across her features. Or she returned to preparing her spells. With the fate of multiple realities hanging in the balance, They set out toward the convergence vortex, united by purpose and the growing connections between them. The journey across the fragmenting landscape of legerdemain tested their combined abilities to their limits. Islands of reality shattered beneath their feet, forcing Ben to transform repeatedly between dimensional variants of his aliens to navigate the increasingly unstable terrain. They encountered more hybrid creatures, beings caught between realities as the dimensions merged chaotically. Some attacked in confusion and fear, while others seemed drawn to the void Omnitrix's energy signature, sensing it as a potential salvation from their fractured existence. Through it all, Ben was impressed by how seamlessly Charmcaster and Kai worked together despite their different backgrounds and methods. Kai's scientific approach complemented Charmcaster's magical expertise, each adapting to support the other's strengths without ego or conflict. As they neared the convergence vortex, the true scale of the catastrophe became clear. The swirling maelstrom of dimensional energy towered above them, stretching impossibly upward and downward simultaneously. Within its rotating layers, fragmented images of countless realities could be glimpsed. Earth cities, alien landscapes, and realms Ben had never encountered. At the very center, suspended in the heart of the vortex, was a crystalline device that pulsed with power, the reality anchor. And beside it, channeling energy through his staff into the artifact, stood Hex. They took cover behind a floating fragment of stone, observing the situation. The anchor's configuration is inverted, Charmcaster whispered, her expert eyes assessing the artifact's energy patterns. Instead of stabilizing dimensional boundaries, it's erasing them. Can you reverse it? Ben asked. She nodded, though uncertainty flickered across her features. Theoretically, yes, but I'd need direct access. And the dimensional turbulence around it is fatal to anything not protected. I can get you there, Ben said, indicating the void Omnitrix. This thing seems assigned specifically for navigating dimensional chaos. Kai finished setting up her last piece of equipment, a modified plumber tech device augmented with components salvaged from the observatory. This will generate a stabilization field, she explained. It won't last long, maybe 30 seconds, but it should give you a window to reach the anchor and reconfigure it. Ben looked between the two women, who had become his allies in this crisis. Despite the chaos around them and the impossible odds, he felt a strange calm, the kind that came before his most successful missions. Hope, he said, using Charmcaster's real name deliberately. You ready to save reality? Something shifted in her expression, a vulnerability briefly visible beneath her usual guarded demeanor. With you, I suppose they're worse partners for apocalypse prevention. The almost smile they shared contained more meaning than either acknowledged. Let's move, Kai interrupted, practical as always. Reality isn't going to save itself. Ben activated the void Omnitrix one more time, selecting the alien form it had been suggesting, a completely new transformation unlike any he'd used before. The transformation felt profound, as though he was becoming something fundamental to reality itself. His body became energy-given temporary form, simultaneously solid and immaterial, existing across multiple dimensional frequencies at once. Void Walker, he named himself, voice resonating across dimensional boundaries. In this form, he could perceive the structure of reality itself, the boundaries between dimensions appearing as luminous membranes that were now tearing apart. He extended hands that shifted between states of being, offering one to Charmcaster. I can protect you through the vortex. She took his hand without hesitation, her own magic flaring in response to his dimensional energy. Ready when you are, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. Ben turned to Kai. Start the stabilizer when we reach the midpoint. Kai nodded, her finger poised above the activation switch. Good luck, both of you. With Charmcaster's hand firmly in his, Ben launched them toward the vortex, his void Walker form allowing them to phase through dimensional distortions that would have shredded normal matter. They passed through layers of fractured reality, glimpsing countless worlds in the process, some familiar, others beyond human comprehension. Halfway to the center, Ben gave the signal, and behind them, Kai activated the stabilizer. A pulse of energy spread outward, temporarily reinforcing the fabric of reality around the vortex. The effect was immediate. The chaotic dimensional energies briefly calmed, creating their window of opportunity. Ben accelerated toward the center where Hex stood beside the reality anchor. Still unaware of their approach through the swirling energies, they burst through the final layer of the vortex, emerging into the eye of the dimensional storm, a space of relative calm where Hex had positioned himself in the anchor. The sorcerer turned in surprise, his expression shifting from shock to rage as he recognized them. Impossible, he snarled, raising his staff. No physical form could penetrate the convergence barriers. I'm full of surprises, Ben replied, his Void Walker form allowing him to maintain stability even in this chaos. He released Charmcaster, positioning himself between her and Hex. Now, hope. Charmcaster immediately moved toward the reality anchor, her hands already weaving complex magical patterns designed to reverse her uncle's work. Hex roared in anger, sending a blast of dimensional energy toward his niece. Ben intercepted it, his Void Walker form absorbing and dispersing the attack across multiple realities simultaneously. Your interference ends now, Tennyson, Hex declared, channeling power through his staff that drew directly from the dimensional collapse around them. What followed was a battle unlike any Ben had experienced before, fought not just physically but across dimensional frequencies. Hex's mastery of dark magic, now enhanced by dimensional energy, made him a formidable opponent. But Ben's Void Walker form existed partially outside conventional reality, allowing him to counter attacks that would have destroyed any normal being. Behind them, Charmcaster worked frantically on the reality anchor, her expert hands manipulating its crystalline components with precise magical commands. It's resisting the reconfiguration, she called out, sweat beading on her forehead from the effort. The convergence has progressed too far. Ben dodged another of Hex's attacks, the energy blast passing through where he had been and creating a tear in reality that revealed a glimpse of an alien ocean. Can you stabilize it manually? Ben asked, countering with a pulse of dimensional energy that momentarily disrupted Hex's connection to his staff. Yes, but I'll need to channel the reversal spell directly through it, Charmcaster replied. That would require your full magical essence, Hex interrupted with a cruel smile. A sacrifice you're not prepared to make, niece. Ben saw the truth in Charmcaster's eyes. What was needed might indeed cost her everything. There has to be another way, Ben insisted, moving closer to the reality anchor. The void Omnitrix pulsed against his energy form, somehow calm, unicating directly with his consciousness. It offered an alternative, a risky one that would tap into the device's core functionality in ways Azimuth had never intended. The Omnitrix, Ben realized. It can interface with the anchor. Charmcaster's eyes widened with understanding. Of course, they're both dimensional manipulation devices, just with different applications. Hex must have realized their plan, for he abandoned subtlety and launched himself toward them, staff blazing with destructive power. I will not allow this. Ben met the attack head-on, his Void Walker form matching Hex's enhanced power. As they clashed in an explosion of dimensional energy, Ben called to Charmcaster, do it now. Connect the Omnitrix to the anchor. She moved swiftly, her hands glowing with magenta energy as she created a magical circuit between the reality anchor and the symbol of the Omnitrix on Ben's chest. The moment the connection was established, Ben felt a surge of power unlike anything he'd experienced before. The Void Omnitrix interfaced directly with the ancient artifact, accessing its fundamental programming. Through their magical link, Charmcaster provided the necessary spell components to reverse the convergence process. Hex roared in frustrated rage, redoubling his assault. You cannot undo what has been set in motion. The old multiverse is dying. Not today, Ben answered, the combined power of the Omnitrix and the anchor flowing through him. With Charmcaster's guidance, he channeled this power outward, targeting the damaged dimensional boundaries. The effect spread in waves. From the convergence point, not erasing the boundaries but reinforcing them, separating what had begun to merge, restoring the natural order of the multiverse. Hex made one final, desperate lunge toward the anchor, but Ben intercepted him. In this moment, with the power of two reality-altering devices flowing through his Void Walker form, Ben temporarily transcended his normal limitations. He seized Hex and pushed him away from the anchor with such force that the sorcerer was thrown back through the vortex wall. It's working, Charmcaster called, her voice strained from the magical effort. The dimensions are stabilizing. Around them, the swirling chaos of the vortex began to separate into distinct layers, each reality returning to its proper place in the multiverse. The fractures in Ledge, Domain started to heal as the magical realm reasserted its boundaries. As the dimensional stability returned, Ben felt the Void Walker form becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. The Omnitrix symbol on his chest flashed warnings. This level of power was never meant to be channeled through the device. "We need to complete the process," he said, feeling his transformation beginning to fail. Quote, "But the Omnitrix can't sustain this much longer." Charmcaster looked at him with sudden determination. "I can take it from here." Before he could protest, she placed both hands directly on the Omnitrix symbol. "Trust me, Ben." Their eyes met in a moment of perfect understanding. He nodded once, and she began chanting in an ancient magical language, drawing the dimensional energy from the Void Omnitrix into herself. The process was clearly painful for her, but she never faltered. As the last of the necessary energy transferred to her, she turned to the reality anchor and thrust both hands into its crystalline structure. "Revertia Dimensiona Separatum," she cried out, her voice echoing across multiple realities simultaneously. The reality anchor pulsed with blinding light, and a final wave of restorative energy exploded outward from the convergence point. Ben felt the Void Walker transformation collapse, returning him to human form as the last of the dimensional energies dissipated. The vortex around them dissolved completely, reality snapping back into its proper configuration. They found themselves standing on a solid platform of legerdemain stone, the magical realm fully restored around them. Charmcaster swayed on her feet, drained from the immense magical effort. Ben caught her before she could fall, supporting her with an arm around her waist. "You did it," he said softly. She managed a tired smile. "We did it. Your Void Omnitrix provided the power, I just directed it." The reality anchor, now returned to its original configuration, settled gently onto the platform beside them, its purpose fulfilled. In the distance, they could see Kai navigating toward them across the now stable landscape of legerdemain. "And Hex?" Charmcaster asked, looking around with concern. "Gone," Ben answered. "The dimensional reversion must have sent him somewhere." He looked down at the Void Omnitrix, which had dimmed to a steady violet-green pulse. "But something tells me we haven't seen the last of him." Charmcaster studied his face with an intensity that made Ben acutely aware of their proximity. "The Omnitrix, it's permanently changed, isn't it?" Ben nodded. "It's evolved again. The Void Omnitrix is here to stay. I think. Just what you needed," she remarked with a hint of her old sarcasm. "More power and responsibility." "Speaking of responsibility," Ben said as Kai approached. "What happens to the reality anchor now?" Charmcaster straightened, regaining some of her strength. "It belongs in the observatory, or what's left of it. As a guardian of legerdemain, it's my duty to ensure it's properly secured." "Guardian?" Ben raised an eyebrow. "That's new." A complex emotion crossed her features. When you've tried to conquer a realm and then seen how fragile it really is, perspectives change. Kai reached them, looking remarkably composed despite the dimensional catastrophe they'd just averted. She glanced between Ben and Charmcaster, noting their proximity with a knowing look before addressing the practical matters at hand. "My readings show dimensional stability is returning to normal," she reported. "But we should get back to Earth soon. The temporary pass age between realities is already beginning to close." Ben looked at the Void Omnitrix. "I don't think that's going to be a problem anymore." With their immediate crisis resolved, the three stood together on the floating island. The magical landscape of legerdemain spreading out around them, damaged but healing. The boundaries between dimensions had been restored, but Ben knew that his own boundaries had changed permanently. He glanced at Charmcaster, catching her watching him with an expression that suggested she was thinking the same thing. Whatever came next, their paths were now intertwined, in ways neither could have anticipated when this day began. The Void Omnitrix pulsed gently against his wrist, a reminder of new powers, new responsibilities, and new possibilities that stretched across dimensions. Chapter 2. Convergence of Fates. 3 days had passed since the dimensional crisis in legerdemain. Ben stood atop Plumber headquarters, gazing at a sunset that seemed impossibly vivid. Everything looked different now, colors more saturated, edges more defined. A side effect, perhaps, of having glimpsed the fabric of reality itself. The void Omnitrix pulsed against his skin with a rhythm that had become familiar. Familiar, but not comfortable, never comfortable, still admiring your new toy. A voice broke his reverie, melodic, with a slight accent that hinted at Eastern European origins despite being native to no country on Earth. Ben turned to see Elena Validus approaching. Her black hair caught the dying sunlight, the blue streak she'd added recently glimmering with an almost metallic sheen. She'd changed dramatically from the desperate, nanite-infected girl he'd known years ago. Now she moved with the confident precision of someone who had conquered her demons and forged them into weapons. Admiring isn't the word I'd use, Ben replied, unconsciously rubbing his wrist. More like trying to understand it. Elena reached his side, dark eyes assessing him with clinical detachment that couldn't quite mask her underlying concern. The nanite scans I ran earlier show it's integrating with your DNA at a cellular level. Not just bonded like the original Omnitrix, it's becoming part of you. She didn't touch him as she said this. Elena rarely touched anyone, a habit formed from years when her nanites might have been contagious. Though she had mastered them now, some precautions died hard. Azimuth isn't answering my calls, Ben admitted. I think he's either too angry or too worried about what I've done. Or both, Elena suggested with a hint of the sharp pragmatism that defined her. You did merge one of his greatest inventions with an interdimensional artifact of unknown origin. The rooftop door swung open before Ben could respond. Kai Green emerged, tablet in hand. Her expression all business despite the late hour. She'd exchanged her field gear for standard plumber uniform, though she still wore the ancient protective amulet her grandfather had given her around her neck. Tokyo, she announced without preamble. Massive dimensional disturbance. Started 20 minutes ago and growing exponentially. Ben straightened. I thought we fixed the dimensional collapse. We stabilized it, corrected another voice as Charmcaster materialized from a swirl of magenta energy beside them. Not the same thing. While the others had changed into plumber uniforms, Charmcaster remained in her sorcerer's attire, though she'd added silver runes to the trim that pulsed with protective magic. Her presence on Earth, specifically at Plumber HQ, had raised eyebrows. But given the interdimensional nature of the crisis, even Grandpa Max had acknowledged her expertise was indispensable. The boundaries were damaged, Charmcaster continued, nodding a greeting to Elena and Kai. What we did was emergency repair work. The dimensional fabric is still healing, which means vulnerable points where pressure can build up and rupture, Elena finished, already pulling up three-dimensional models on her specialized gauntlet computer. Like weakened scar tissue, Ben studied the holographic display showing the Tokyo anomaly. Unlike the chaotic tiers in legerdemain, this disturbance had a distinct pattern, almost mathematical in its precision. That doesn't look natural, he observed. It's not, Kai confirmed, swiping through data on her tablet. The energy signature matches the technology the observatory was using to monitor dimensional boundaries. Someone's deliberately creating a breach, Charmcaster concluded, her expression darkening. Using knowledge from legerdemain, Ben looked at each woman in turn, the archaeologist, the nanite expert, the sorceress. Three brilliant minds with entirely different backgrounds and methodologies, now united by a crisis bigger than any of them. In just 3 days, they'd formed an unconventional team that somehow worked despite, or perhaps because of, their differences. Then we'd better get to Tokyo, he decided. Elena checked her specialized equipment, a combination of plumber tech and her own nanite innovations. The Rust Bucket 3 is prepped for launch. Max authorized full-spectrum containment gear based on my recommendations. We have another problem, Kai interjected, looking up from her tablet with concern. The Japanese branch of the plumbers has reported an Inkersine diplomatic vessel entering Earth's atmosphere without clearance. It's heading directly for the anomaly site. Ben's jaw tightened. Inkersines. Great. Not just any Inkersines, Kai clarified. Initial scans indicate it's a royal transport. Diplomatic markers. Quote, Adia, Ben concluded. The name carried complicated history. The Inkersine princess had alternated between trying to conquer Earth and flirting with him, sometimes doing both simultaneously. This day just gets better, Charmcaster muttered. Elena was already moving toward the door. I've worked with Inkersine tech before. Their vessels use dimensional dampeners for faster-than-light travel. If they get too close to an active breach, she didn't need to finish. They all understood the implications. "Move out," Ben ordered, his voice slipping naturally into the command tone he'd developed over years of leadership. "We need to secure the site, contain the breach, and intercept that ship before they accidentally make things worse." As they descended into the building, Ben found Charmcaster falling into step beside him, her voice lowered for his ears alone. "You're different," she observed. "Since Legerdemain. More centered." Ben considered this. Nearly watching multiple realities collapse tends to provide perspective. A smile ghosted across her lips. "That's not what I meant." Her eyes dropped meaningfully to the void Omnitrix. "It's changing you, and not just physically." Before Ben could respond, they reached the hangar where the Rust Bucket 3 waited, streamlined, powerful, and recently upgraded with Alina's nanite-enhanced systems. The conversation would have to wait. As they boarded, Ben couldn't help noticing how smoothly they operated as a unit despite having worked together for only days. Kai took navigation, Alina systems, while Charmcaster prepared magical countermeasures for whatever waited in Tokyo. No wasted motion, no unnecessary discussion. Just four capable individuals united by purpose. The flight to Tokyo took less than an hour with the Rust Bucket's enhanced propulsion. They spent the time reviewing data, preparing equipment, and strategizing for multiple scenarios. The professional atmosphere was punctuated only occasionally by the subtle undercurrents of their complex interpersonal dynamics, a lingering glance from Charmcaster, a touch that lasted slightly too long when Kai handed Ben a tablet, careful distance Elena maintained from everyone. Tokyo appeared on their view screen, its sprawling metropolitan glow dimmed by an unnatural phenomenon at its center. A swirling vortex of energy hovered above Shibuya Crossing, violet-tinged lightning arcing from its edges to nearby buildings. The normally crowded intersection had been evacuated, leaving an eerie emptiness beneath the dimensional wound. "Energy readings are off the charts," Elena reported, nanites swirling around her fingers as she interfaced directly with the ship's sensors. "Different frequency than Legerdemain, though. This breach leads somewhere else. Can you pinpoint the origin point?" Ben asked, studying the tactical display. Charmcaster closed her eyes, her hands weaving patterns in the air as she extended her magical senses. "It's not a magical dimension," she determined after a moment. "More conceptual, abstract. The null void," Kai suggested. "No," Ben and Charmcaster said simultaneously, then exchanged glances. "This feels purer somehow," Charmcaster continued. "Like mathematical law given form. The forge of creation," Ben ventured, remembering the realm where celestial sapiens dwelled. Elena's monitoring equipment suddenly blared warnings. "Incursine vessel entering the airspace. They're on approach to the anomaly." "Take us in," Ben ordered. "We need to intercept them before." A brilliant flash of light erupted from the vortex, temporarily blinding them even through the viewscreen's automatic filters. When their vision cleared, the Incursine ship was listing badly, caught in the anomaly's gravitational pull. "They've lost propulsion," Elena reported. "Hull integrity compromising." Ben made an instant decision. "Bring us alongside. We're going to attempt emergency evacuation." I expertly maneuvered the Rust Bucket 3 alongside the damaged Incursine vessel. Through the viewports, they could see the ship's outer hull beginning to warp as dimensional forces pulled at its structure. "I can create a temporary bridge," Charmcaster offered, her hands already glowing with magenta energy. Ben nodded. "Do it." Elena, Kai, prepare the medical bay and secure any technology they might have that could affect the breach. As Charmcaster worked her spell, creating a shimmering pathway between the vessels, the Incursine ship's airlock burst open. A figure leapt across the gap before. The magical bridge was even complete, a testament to either incredible courage or reckless impatience. Adia landed in a perfect roll on their deck, rising smoothly to her feet with characteristic swagger despite the circumstances. The Incursine princess, or empress, depending on which coup was currently successful, looked much as Ben remembered, though her military attire now featured more diplomatic insignia than weaponry. "Tennyson," she greeted with that familiar raspy voice and predatory smile. "Still showing up where the action is, I see." Ben maintained his professional demeanor despite their complicated history. "Adia, Want to explain why you're flying into dimensional anomalies? Her amphibian features arranged themselves into an expression of calculated innocence. Diplomatic mission to Earth. Got caught in unexpected turbulence. Totally not my fault. And the direct course toward the largest interdimensional breach this planet has seen in decades. Elena challenged, her nani. Taze swirling protectively around her hands. Adia's yellow eyes shifted to Elena, narrowing slightly. You're new. I like the whole technology symbiote vibe you've got going. Her tongue flicked out, briefly, an incursine gesture that could indicate either interest or assessment of a potential threat. To answer your question, technologically advanced species tend to investigate anomalies, not run from them. Your ship's structural integrity is compromised, Kai interrupted, ever practical. Are there others aboard? Just my security detail and science officer, Adia replied with a dismissive wave. They can handle themselves. As if summoned by her words, two more figures emerged from the incursine vessel onto Charmcaster's magical bridge, a standard incursine guard and a much larger foe. That caused Ben's eyebrows to rise in surprise. Luma, he exclaimed as the towering Tetraman female ducked to enter their ship. Luma Red Wind, princess of Koros and one of Ben's more intimidating ex-fiancés. Straightened to her full impressive height, her four muscular arms crossed over her armored chest as she regarded him with an expression that had mellowed from murderous to merely stern since their last encounter. Tennyson, she acknowledged with a formal nod. Our paths cross again under interesting circumstances. You're working with the Incursines now? Ben asked, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. Contracted scientific consultant, Luma corrected with precise diction that belied her warrior appearance. My expertise in quantum gravitational engineering proved useful when Father expanded our diplomatic initiatives. Elena's monitoring equipment suddenly blared again. The breach is expanding. Energy surge imminent. The dimensional vortex above Tokyo pulsed violently, sending a shockwave that rocked both vessels. Charmcaster's magical bridge flickered dangerously. Last incursine coming across, Kai reported from the airlock. Bridge collapsing. The Null member of Adia's crew barely made it through before Charmcaster's spell dissolved completely. The incursine guard stumbled into the Rust Bucket 3 as their own vessel was wrenched violently into the dimensional breach, disappearing in a flash of distorted space-time. Well, that's just perfect, Adia grumbled, though she seemed remarkably unconcerned about the loss of her ship. So, Tennyson, what's the plan for the Swirly Doom Vortex? Because my diplomatic immunity doesn't cover being stranded on this backwater planet. Before Ben could respond, the vortex pulsed again, more violently this time. The Rust Bucket III's proximity alarms screamed as the ship was caught in the dimensional pull. Full reverse thrusters, Ben ordered, but Kai was already ahead of him. No effect, she called back. The gravitational distortion is too strong. Elena's fingers flew across her control panel, rerouting power to dimensional stabilizers. Too late, Charmcaster said grimly as the viewscreen filled with swirling energy. We're going in. The void Omnitrix pulsed frantically on Ben's wrist, resonating with the dimensional forces surrounding them. Acting on instinct rather than calculation, Ben slammed his hand down on the device. Void shield, he shouted as transformation energy enveloped him. The alien form that emerged resembled Cannonbolt but with significant differences. Instead of the standard yellow and white coloration, this variant had a crystalline outer shell that refracted light in impossible patterns. When Ben curled into defensive position, the shell expanded to create a field that encompassed the entire ship. Just in time, the Rust Bucket 3 plunged into the dimensional breach, reality distorting around them in nauseating patterns. But within the protection of Void Shield's field, the ship remained intact as they traversed the boundary between dimensions. The journey lasted seconds that felt like hours, the laws of physics bending around them in ways that human minds weren't designed to process. Then, with a jolt that threw everyone against restraints and bulkheads, they emerged into silence. Perfect, absolute stillness. The viewscreen showed neither Earth nor any recognizable dimension. They floated in a vast expanse of what appeared to be conceptual space, not empty, but filled with mathematical structures and geometric patterns that shifted and flowed with perfect precision. Distant shapes resembled buildings or perhaps organisms, though they followed design principles no Earth architect would conceive. Ben reverted to human form, the void. Omnitrix recalibrating with a soft pulse. Where are we? He asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. The quantum realm, Luma answered, her 4 eyes wide with scientific fascination as she moved to the viewscreen. I've only seen theoretical models. It's a dimension where mathematical laws take physical form. Is it dangerous? Kai asked, already running environmental scans. Depends on your definition. Adia responded with characteristic flippancy. Technically, we shouldn't be able to exist here in our normal states. Corporeal beings typically dissolve into their component equations. Then why aren't we dissolving? Elena questioned, her nanites swirling agitatedly around her hands as they attempted to interface with the incomprehensible environment. Charmcaster's gaze fixed on Ben, specifically. On the void Omnitrix. Because something is protecting us. Her voice held a mixture of awe and concern. The void Omnitrix is creating a dimensional bubble around the ship, TRA. Enslating this realm into terms our minds and bodies can process. Ben studied the device on his wrist with newfound respect and trepidation. It's acting on its own initiative. Again, a new alert sounded from the navigation console. Kai studied the readings with a frown. I'm detecting a structure approximately 12 kilometers from our position. Solid mass, appears to be generating an energy signature similar to the Tokyo breach. Could be our way home, Ben suggested. Or the source of our problems. Only one way to find out, Adia declared, already striding toward the ship's equipment lockers. I assume this bucket has EVA gear. Luma moved to join her. The quantum realm's native patterns might interfere with standard propulsion. We should prepare for gravitational anomalies. Ina raised an eyebrow at their presumptuous attitudes but addressed Ben instead of challenging them directly. The nanites can adapt to create temporary protective shells if necessary. I can extend Viraj to 2 additional people besides myself. Ben assessed their situation with the practiced efficiency of a veteran leader. 7 individuals with wildly different capabilities and agendas, dead in a dimension that shouldn't be able to support their existence, facing unknown dangers with limited resources. Just another Tuesday, really. We'll take the ship as far as we safely can, then deploy in 2 teams, he decided. Elena, Charmcaster, Adia with me. Kai, you pilot with Luma and, he glanced at the Inkerseen guard who had remained silently at attention near the airlock. Corporal Sachs, sir, the guard supplied with unexpected formality. Corporal Sachs stays with your team as security, Ben finished. We'll investigate the structure while you maintain the ship in retrieval position. Adia's lips curled in a satisfied smirk. Always knew you'd invite me on a date eventually, Tennyson. Only took interdimensional peril to make it happen. Ben ignored her comment with practiced ease. Turning to address final preparations. Everyone gear up. We don't know what we're walking into. As they prepared, Ben found Charmcaster at his side again, her voice low. There's something else in this dimension. Something alive. Her silver hair seemed to float slightly in the ship's normal gravity, responding to energies only she could perceive. I can sense awareness watching us. Ben nodded, having learned to trust her magical instincts. Hostile, curious, she replied after a moment's consideration. For now, Kai skillfully navigated the rust bucket 3 through the strange dimensional landscape, compensating for gravitational fluctuations with remarkable precision. The structure grew larger on their viewscreen, a complex crystalline formation that resembled both a building and a living organism, pulsing with internal light that followed distinct mathematical sequences. As close as I can safely get, Kai announced, bringing the ship to a stable hover approximately half a kilometer from their destination. Any closer and the gravitational distortions could compromise our engines. Ben nodded. Maintain position and be ready for emergency extraction. If we're not back in 2 hours, return to the breach point and attempt transit. Without you, Kai challenged, her dark eyes meeting his with unmistakable concern beneath her professional demeanor. Without us, Ben confirmed firmly. The priority is bringing back information about this dimension and the breaches. Earth needs to be prepared. The unspoken weight of responsibility settled over the command deck. The familiar burden of putting mission above personal safety that defined their work as plumbers and defenders. Elena's nanites had constructed specialized environmental suits for herself, Ben, and Charmcaster, sleek, form-fitting protective layers that shimmered with microscopic technology. Adia refused such protection, insisting that her increasing physiology was adaptable enough for brief exposure to the quantum realm. "You're assuming a lot about a dimension no Incursian has visited before," Elena pointed out as they prepared to disembark. Adia's tongue flicked out dismissively. "Conquered 12 planets, survived 4 assassination attempts, and overthrew my father twice. I'll take my chances with some mathematical space." The team deployed through the airlock, using specialized propulsion units to traverse the distance between the ship and the crystalline structure. The experience of moving through the quantum realm defied conventional description. Distances seemed both vast and negligible simultaneously, their bodies feeling weightless yet perfectly anchored. Ben kept the team in tight formation, the void Omnitrix pulsing steadily as though communicating with the dimension itself. Around them, mathematical constants took visible form, perfect geometric shapes, Fibonacci spirals, and more complex patterns that human mathematics had yet to discover. "It's beautiful," Charmcaster murmured, her magical senses clearly perceiving aspects of the realm invisible to the others. "Pure conceptual reality without the messiness of physical laws." "Speak for yourself," Adia grumbled, though her amphibian eyes were wide with poorly concealed wonder. "I prefer dimensions with solid ground and breathable atmosphere." They reached the crystalline structure, which now towered above them like a mountain comprised of perfect geometric formations interlocking in impossible ways. No obvious entrance presented itself, the entire surface a seamless mathematical construction. "Now what?" Elena asked, her nanites scanning the structure and reporting back data too complex for conventional analysis. Ben studied the void Omnitrix, which was pulsing more rapidly as they approached. "I think it wants me to transform again." "It wants," Adia repeated skeptically. "Since when does technology want things?" "Since it merged with an interdimensional artifact that predates Galvan civilization," Charmcaster replied dryly. "Try to keep up." Before Adia could retort, Ben activated the void Omnitrix, selecting a silhouette that resembled gray matter but with significant modifications. E-transformation wrapped him in violet-green energy, reshaping his form into something both familiar and entirely new. When the light faded, Ben had become a variant of gray matter whose body seemed artially composed of living mathematical equations. Symbols and formulas flowed across his small gray form like liquid, and his eyes perceived the world in terms of underlying mathematical principles rather than physical properties. "Void Mind," he named himself, the voice high-pitched but resonating with harmonic overtones. "I can see it now. The structure isn't solid in the conventional sense, it's a three-dimensional representation of an 11-dimensional construct." Moving with newfound purpose, Void Mind approached the crystalline surface, placing tiny hands against it. The mathematical patterns flowing across his body aligned with the structure's own patterns, creating a resonance effect. "Fascinating," he murmured, more to himself than the others. "It's not just a building, it's a translation matrix. A bridge between conceptual reality and physical dimensions." A section of the crystalline surface rippled and reconfigured, forming an opening precisely sized for their party. Beyond lay an interior space that somehow appeared larger than the external structure should allow. "That's convenient," Elena observed cautiously, her nanites forming defensive configurations around her hands. "It's responding to the mathematical harmony I created," Void Mind explained, already moving toward the entrance. "This facility was designed to be accessed by beings who understand its fundamental principles. Or by beings with fancy watches that do the understanding for them," Adia added, following closely behind with characteristic bravado masking her evident unease. Charmcaster moved alongside Ben, magical energy swirling subtly around her fingers as she maintained constant vigilance. Of all of them, she seemed least discomfited by the dimensional strangeness, perhaps because, as a sorceress of legerdemain, conceptual reality was not entirely unfamiliar territory. They entered a vast chamber where mathematical principles took physical form in ways that should have been impossible. Streams of numerical concepts flowed through channels like liquid, geometric shapes performed complex transformations in midair, and at the center stood a pulsating core of pure mathematical energy. "This is incredible," Void Mind breathed, his enhanced intellect processing the impossible sight. "It's a dimensional observatory, similar to the one in legerdemain but operating on mathematical principles rather than magical ones. Can it get us home?" Elena asked practically, her nanites attempting to interface with the flowing streams of mathematical energy with limited success. It can do more than that, came a new voice from behind them. It can save your dimension, or doom it. They spun to face a figure perched atop a crystalline formation. Humanoid but distinctly feline in appearance, with sleek fur patterned in geometric designs and eyes that shifted colors according to mathematical sequences. Despite her exotic appearance, there was something unmistakably familiar about her confident pose and sly expression. Nyan-Si-chan, Ben exclaimed, reverting to human form in his surprise. The feline woman grinned, revealing delicately pointed teeth. In the flesh, well, mathematically optimized flesh in this dimension. She leapt down with impossible grace, landing soundlessly before them. Fancy meeting you here, Ben Tennyson. Charmcaster moved slightly forward, magic flaring protectively. You know this cat person. We've met, Ben confirmed cautiously. Though not in this form. She used to have the power to control cats. Nyan-Si laughed, a sound like musical chimes arranged in perfect harmonic sequences. Such a limited description of my abilities. Here in the quantum realm, I've discovered my true potential. I don't just control felines, I communicate with feline consciousness across dimensional boundaries. What does that even mean? Adia demanded, hand hovering near her concealed weapon. It means, Nyan-Si explained with exaggerated patience, that cats exist in a state of quantum superposition. They perceive multiple dimensional realities simultaneously. I've always been able to tap into that perception, I just didn't understand what I was accessing until I found my way here. Alina's nanites swirled cautiously around her. How long have you been in this dimension? Time works differently here, Nyan-Si replied with a dismissive wave. Long enough to become its most successful adaptation specialist. The real question is, what brought the great Ben Tennyson and his, she paused, yellow eyes scanning their unusual group with evident amusement, diverse companionship to my domain. Your domain, Charmcaster repeated skeptically. Nyan-Si's tail swished in a precise mathematical arc. Figure of speech. Though the observers do permit me certain privileges in exchange for my services. Quote, observers? Ben questioned, the void Omnitrix pulsing at the term. The native consciousness of this realm, Nyan-Si explained, gesturing to the mathematical flows surrounding them. They monitor dimensional boundaries and maintain mathematical constants across the multiverse. Very serious, very boring, but extremely powerful. And they just let you hang out here? Adia asked incredulously. Nyan-Si stretched in a deliberately feline manner. I help them understand organic beings. They help me evolve beyond human limitations. Mutually beneficial arrangement. Her gaze fixed on Ben's wrist. Though I suspect they'll be much more interested in that device you're wearing. The void Omnitrix pulsed more rapidly, as though responding to her words. Ben NST instinctively covered it with his other hand, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by anyone present. We came through a dimensional breach from Earth, Ben explained, deciding that limited honesty was their best approach. We need to return and close these breaches before they cause more damage. Nyan-Si's expression shifted to one of unexpected seriousness. The breaches aren't accidents, Ben. They're being created deliberately by someone who understands both the mathematical and magical principles governing dimensional boundaries. Hex, Charmcaster suggested grimly. No, Nyan-Si replied, shaking her head. Someone who makes your uncle look like an amateur. Someone who's been manipulating dimensional boundaries for centuries. A chill ran down Ben's spine as realization dawned. Eon. Nyan-Si's eyes widened in genuine surprise. You know of him. We've crossed paths, Ben replied grimly. He's a time traveler who targets alternate versions of me across dimensions. He's more than that, Nyan-Si said, moving toward the pulsating core at the center of the chamber. The observers consider him a dimensional parasite, consuming timeline energy to extend his own existence. And recently, he's expanded his ambitions. She gestured to the core, which reconfigured to display a holographic representation of multiple dimensions, Earth, Legerdemain, and countless others interconnected by energy pathways. Several points along these pathways glowed red, indicating breaches. He's creating controlled collapses, Elena realized, her analytical mind quickly grasping the pattern. Not to destroy dimensions but to harvest their temporal energy during the instability. Precisely, Nyan-Si confirmed. Each breach generates enormous temporal displacement that he can absorb. The observers are concerned, but their non-interference protocols prevent direct action. How convenient for them, Adia commented sarcastically. Ben studied the holographic display with growing concern. His breaches are increasing in frequency and magnitude. The Tokyo incident was bigger than anything we've seen before. It's building to something, Charmcaster added, her magical senses clearly perceiving patterns the others missed. These aren't random target points, they form a specific geometric configuration when mapped across dimensions. Nyansi nodded approvingly. The sorceress is correct. Eon is creating a dimensional circuit, a closed loop of breaches that, when complete, will allow him to harvest energy from multiple realities simultaneously. How do we stop him? Ben asked, cutting to the essential question. The same way you got here, Nyansi replied, gesturing to the void Omnitrix. That device is a dimensional key, it can seal breaches as effectively as it can navigate them. Then we need to return to Earth immediately, Elena stated. If Tokyo was just one node in this circuit, she was interrupted by a violent tremor that shook the entire structure. The mathematical F-lows surrounding them pulsed erratically, patterns destabilizing momentarily before reforming in new configurations. What was that? Adia demanded, dropping into a defensive crouch. Nyansi's ears flattened against her head. Her expression suddenly alarmed. We have a problem. The observers have detected your void Omnitrix and recognized its dimensional manipulation capabilities. She moved quickly toward one of the flowing mathematical streams, placing her hand into it as though reading information. They've classified it as a threat to dimensional stability. That's ridiculous, Ben protested. We're trying to fix the breaches, not cause them. The observers don't distinguish between intention and capability, Nyansi explained urgently. They only know your device can manipulate dimensional boundaries, something they're programmed to prevent after the last multiversal collapse. Another, stronger tremor shook the structure. Through the crystalline walls, they could see geometric patterns throughout the quantum realm rearranging themselves, forming what appeared to be defensive configurations. We need to leave, Charmcaster stated firmly. Now, Ben activated his communicator. Kai, bring the ship as close as you can. We need immediate extraction. Kai's voice came through with significant interference. Something's happening out here. The entire dimension seems to be reconfiguring. Gravitational constants are shifting unpredictably. The observers are activating their defense systems, Nyansi explained, already moving toward the entrance. They're going to attempt to neutralize the void Omnitrix, with or without removing it from your wrist first. Charming, Adia muttered. Any other helpful information you've been keeping to yourself, cat girl? Just one thing, Nyansi replied as they rushed toward the exit. I'm coming with you. The observers consider me compromised now for assisting you. They emerged from the structure to find the quantum realm transformed around them. The once beautiful mathematical patterns had rearranged into aggressive configurations that pulsed with energy. In the distance, they could see the Rust Bucket 3 maneuvering erratically through gravitational distortions that hadn't existed before. There, Elena pointed to where Kai was bringing the ship as close as possible to their position, fighting against the increasingly hostile dimensional forces. Ben activated the Void Omnitrix again, selecting a form designed for rapid movement. Void velocity should get us there fastest. Everyone hold on. The transformation enveloped him in violet green light. But before it could complete, a beam of pure mathematical energy struck from above. The void Omnitrix sparked and whined, the transformation process stalling halfway. What's happening? Ben gasped, his body caught between human and alien form. Charmcaster's hands glowed with magical energy as she created a protective barrier around them. They're targeting the transformation sequence. It's when the Omnitrix is most vulnerable. From the shifting patterns above them emerged a figure unlike anything they'd encountered before, a being composed of perfect mathematical constructs arranged in humanoid form. It radiated authority and cold, calculated purpose. Dimensional manipulator detected, it intoned in a voice that seemed to bypass their ears and speak directly to their mathematical understanding of reality. Threat assessment. Severe. Containment protocols initiated. The Observer Prime, Nyansi whispered, genuine fear evident in her voice. The governing consciousness of this realm. Ben struggled against the interrupted transformation, the void Omnitrix cycling between forms as it attempted to stabilize. Around them, the mathematical fabric of the quantum realm warped inward, creating a containment field that grew smaller by the second. Benjamin Tennyson, the Observer Prime, addressed him directly. Your device violates fundamental dimensional laws. It will be confiscated and neutralized. We're trying to stop Eon from destabilizing dimensions, Ben argued, forcing the words through the pain of his half-transformed state. The void Omnitrix is our only way to seal the breaches. The Observer Prime was unmoved. Eon's activities are within tolerable parameters. Your device represents an exponentially greater threat to dimensional stability. Tolerable parameters, Elena challenged, her nanites forming a secondary defensive barrier around Charmcaster's magical shield. He's creating breaches that are destroying populated worlds. Individual dimensions are expendable. The Prime responded with cold logic. The multiverse's mathematical integrity is paramount. Adia snarled in disgust. And people say Incursines have lousy ethics. The containment field tightened further as the Observer Prime approached, its mathematical body reconfiguring to create apparatus clearly designed for removal of the void Omnitrix. We need options, Ben managed through gritted teeth. Still fighting the interrupted transformation. Charmcaster's eyes met his, a decision forming in her expression. I can create a dimensional pocket, temporarily say. Parade us from the quantum realm's main continuum. But I'll need to drop our current shield. How temporarily? Adia demanded. Seconds at most, Charmcaster replied. But it might be enough for Ben to complete a transformation. Elena nodded. My nanites will provide cover for those seconds. Do it, Ben ordered. With perfect synchronization, Charmcaster dropped her magical barrier as Elena's nanites swarmed outward in a cloud of microscopic technology. The distraction momentarily disrupted the Observer Prime's mathematical calculations, creating the opening Charmcaster needed. Her hands oved in complex patterns as she chanted in the ancient language of legerdemain. Magenta energy spiraled around their group, creating a bubble that briefly phased them slightly out of alignment with He quantum realm's primary dimensional frequency. Now, Ben, she shouted. Free from the Prime's interference, the void Omnitrix completed its transformation sequence. Ben emerged as void velocity, high. S-form streamlined for dimensional travel with energy contrails that existed across multiple reality frequencies simultaneously. Without hesitation, he gathered the others, Charmcaster, Elena, Adia, ND Nyanc, and accelerated toward the Rust Bucket 3, moving faster than the Observer Prime's computational systems could track through their dimensional pocket. They reached the ship just as Charmcaster's spell collapsed, the dimensional pocket reintegrating with the main continuum. Ben phased them directly through the hull, a capability this variant form possessed, materializing on the command deck beside a startled Kai, Luma, and Corporal Sax. Go, Ben shouted, maintaining his transformed state. Full power to engines. Kai needed no further prompting, her hands flying across the controls. As she directed the ship away from the crystalline structure and toward the spatial coordinates where they had entered this realm. The Observer Prime's voice resonated throughout the dimension, Mayhem. Attical forces converging to prevent their escape. Dimensional manipulator must be contained. Initiating universal reconfiguration. The entire quantum realm began to shift around them, mathematical Onstants rewriting themselves to create an inescapable trap. The Rust Bucket 3 shuddered as fundamental forces pulled at its structure from multiple dimensional frequencies simultaneously. The breach point is closing. Luma reported from the sensor station, all four arms working different controls with remarkable coordination. Dimensional frequency shifting to prevent re-entry. Ben Concentra. Ted on maintaining his void velocity form despite the strain, knowing it was creating a protective field that prevented the ship from being torn apart by the dimensional forces. But even this enhanced form had limits against the power of a being that controlled reality's mathematical underpinnings. We need a dimensional anchor point, Charmcaster called out, already beginning another spell. Something connected to our home dimension that the Prime can't easily reconfigure. Like this, Nyanc asked, producing a small crystal pendant from her geometric clothing. I've kept it attuned to Earth's dimensional frequency for sentimental reasons. Charmcaster nodded sharply, incorporating the pendant into her spell matrix. Elena, I need your nanites to amplify the signal. Without hesitation, Elena directed her nanites to envelop the pendant, their microscopic technology interfacing with the crystal's dimensional resonance. Luma, Ben called through the strain of maintaining his transformation. Can you calculate a dimensional vector that would allow us to ride the collapse wave rather than fight against it? The Tetraman princess analyzed the sensor data with impressive speed, her scientific expertise evident in the precision of her calculations. Trajectory plotted, but it's counterintuitive. We would need to accelerate toward the dimensional barrier at precisely 47 degrees from our current vector. Do it, Ben ordered Kai, who immediately adjusted their course. This is insane, Adia commented, though she made no move to countermand the order, instead bracing herself against a bulkhead with the practiced stance of someone who had survived numerous space battles. Sometimes insanity is just sanity your mind hasn't caught up to yet, Nyancy offered philosophically. Her feline features serene despite their perilous situation. The Observer Prime's forces converged around the ship, mathematical constructs attempting to deconstruct their very existence into component equations. Only Ben's void velocity field and Charmcaster's spell prevented immediate dissolution. 5 seconds to dimensional barrier, Kai announced, her voice steady despite the violent shaking of the ship. 4, 3, everyone hold on, Ben shouted, pushing his transformation to its absolute limit as he created a dimensional slipstream effect around the vessel. 2, 1, the hip hit the dimensional barrier at precisely the angle Luma had calculated, not fighting against the collapse but riding its wave like a surfer using a tsunami's power. The combined effects of Ben's transformation, Charmcaster's spell, Elena's nanite amplification, and Nyancy's dimensional anchor created a unique harmonic that briefly synchronized with the collapsing boundary. Reality itself seemed to bend around them, stretching and compressing in ways that human senses weren't equipped to process. For an eternal instant, they existed everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, their very molecule scattered across dimensional frequencies before being violently reassembled. Then, with a thunderous crack that seemed to echo across realities, they burst through and emerged not above Tokyo, but in an entirely different dimensional pocket. The viewscreen showed a swirling void of temporal energy, neither quantum realm nor Earth, but a space between spaces. Crystalline structures floating in his void resembled frozen moments of time, each containing glimpses of different realities. Ben reverted to human form, dropping to one knee in exhaustion. The void Omnitrix dimmed temporarily, bratting after the immense energy expenditure. Where are we? Kai asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she stared at the impossible view. A dimensional junction, Charmcaster replied, her own magical energies nearly depleted from maintaining her spell through the transition. A pocket between realities where dimensions overlap. Nyancy moved to the viewscreen, placing one hand against it as her feline eyes narrowed in concentration. It's a temporal fold, a place where time itself fractures into potential paths. Her tail swished in agitation. This isn't good. This is very, very not good. Care to elaborate on? Not good, Adia demanded, having maintained her composure better than most might have expected during their dimensional transition. Before Nyancy could answer, a new voice spoke from behind them, smooth, cultured, and chillingly familiar to Ben. What my feline friend means is that you've escaped one predator only to land in another's hunting grounds. They turned to Phi, a purple armored figure standing on the command deck where no one had been moments before. His face was obscured by a helmet, but his identity was unmistakable to Ben. Eon, he acknowledged grimly, rising to his feet despite his exhaustion. Benjamin, Eon returned with mock cordiality. How thoughtful of you to deliver the void Omnitrix directly to me, and with such interesting companions. His gaze swept over the assembled group, lingering appreciatively on each of the women before returning to Ben. The Observer Prime did me quite the favor by redirecting your dimensional transit. Luma stepped forward, all 4 arms flexing menacingly. You were responsible for the dimensional breaches threatening multiple worlds. Eon made a dismissive gesture. A necessary process. Dimensional energy is the purest form of power in the multiverse, and I require significant amounts for my next evolution. Evolution into what? Elena questioned, her nanites already forming defensive configurations despite their depleted state. Into something beyond time itself, Eon replied, his voice taking on an almost religious fervor. The Chronosapiens believe they understand temporal manipulation, but they merely play with the surface tensions of reality. True mastery requires breaking free of dimensional constraints entirely. Ben activated the Void Omnitrix, cycling through available transformations. Not happening on my watch. Eon laughed, a sound devoid of genuine humor. Your little wordplay aside, Benjamin, that device on your wrist is the final component I require. The Void Omnitrix contains dimensional manipulation capabilities that, when combined with my temporal mastery, will allow complete transcendence of multiversal laws. You want to become a celestial sapien, Charmcaster realized. Magical energy flaring anew despite her exhaustion. Without the personality limitations. Crudely put, but essentially correct, Eon confirmed. And I've spent centuries manipulating events across dimensions to create this precise moment. With blinding speed, he thrust his hand forward, sending a wave of temporal energy across the command deck. Everyone except Ben found themselves froze. And in time, conscious but unable to move as their personal timelines were temporarily suspended. Ben managed to activate the Void Omnitrix just as the temporal wave reached him, transforming into a Vari ant of clockwork whose mechanical body incorporated void energy components. This form, Void Time, as Ben instinctively named it, existed partially outside normal temporal flow, allowing him to resist Eon's attack. Impressive, Eon acknowledged, genuine respect briefly coloring his tone. The Void Omnitrix adapts to threats more effectively than any previous version. It's not the watch, Ben replied, his voice resonating with mechanical and dimensional harmonics simultaneously. It's the wielder. Their battle erupted across the command deck, a conflict not just of physical force but of temporal and dimensional manipulation. Eon's mastery of time allowed him to accelerate, decelerate, and even briefly reverse the flow of events, while Ben's void time form could counter by phase shifting between dimensional frequencies, existing simultaneously at multiple temporal coordinates. The others remained frozen, aware but helpless as reality warped around the combatants. Each blow between Ben and Eon created ripples in the fabric of space-time, temporarily revealing glimpses of alternate realities where different versions of themselves fought different battles. You cannot win this, Benjamin. Eon taunted as he temporarily fragmented Ben's form across 3 different timelines. I have spent lifetimes perfecting my abilities, while you stumbled upon the Void Omnitrix mere days ago. Ben struggled to reintegrate his consciousness, drawing upon instincts developed through years of wielding the Omnitrix in its various forms. Maybe, he conceded, his fragmented voice echoing from multiple temporal points. But I'm not fighting alone. The Void Omnitrix pulsed, somehow connecting with the frozen but conscious minds of his companions. Through means Ben couldn't comprehend but instinctively trusted. Their knowledge and abilities began flowing into his void time form, Charmcaster's magical understanding, Alina's technological precision, Luma's scientific expertise, Adia's tactical cunning, Nyansi's dimensional perception, and Kai's adaptive problem solving. His fragmented form suddenly reintegrated with new capabilities, moving through Eon's temporal manipulations with unprecedented coordination. Each attack now incorporated elements from his allies' specialties, magical countermeasures against temporal locks, nanite-inspired temporal shielding, gravitational engineering principles applied to time dilation effects. Eon faltered, genuinely surprised by this development. Impossible. The Void Omnitrix shouldn't be capable of neural synchronization across suspended timelines. You said it yourself, Ben replied, pressing his advantage. This isn't like previous versions. With renewed strength, Ben forced Eon back across the command deck, each precisely calculated street right disrupting the time traveler's control over the frozen temporal field. Cracks appeared in Eon's armor as dimensional and temporal energies collided with increasing intensity. Recognizing his disadvantage, Eon made a strategic retreat, not physically but temporally, shifting himself seconds out of phase with the current timeline. His voice echoed from this displaced position. Impressive adaptation, Benjamin. Perhaps I underestimated the synergistic potential of your little team. His form flickered as he prepared to depart this dimensional pocket entirely. But remember, I exist across all timelines simultaneously. This encounter is merely one of countless interactions between us. In the majority, I succeed. Then I'll just have to beat you in this one, Ben responded, concentrating Hi's energy into a final temporal dimensional pulse aimed at Eon's fluctuating form. The pulse struck just as Eon attempted to temporal shift away, disrupting his departure coordinates. With a howl of frustration, he vanished, not to his intended destination but scattered across multiple temporal fragments within the dimensional void surrounding them. The moment Eon disappeared, his temporal freeze released. The others gasped as they regained mobility, adapting quickly to the disorienting experience of time resumption. What happened? Charmcaster asked, immediately moving to Ben's side as he reverted to human form. The strain of the complex transformation evident in his exhausted posture. Eon's gone. Temporarily, Ben explained, leaning against a console for support. The void Omnitrix somehow connected with all of you during the temporal freeze. Your knowledge, your skills, they flowed into my transformation. It gave me the edge I needed. Elena studied him with scientific curiosity. Noi. Raw synchronization across suspended timelines. Theoretically impossible. Yet another impossible thing to add to our growing list, Kai remarked dryly, already checking the ship's systems for damage from their dimensional transit. Luma approached, her 4 eyes narrowed in thought. Eon's strategy suggests multiple dimensional breaches forming a specific pattern. If we could identify that pattern, we could predict where he'll attempt to create the next breach. Nyancy finished, her feline senses still attuned to the dimensional currents surrounding them. And potentially get ahead of his plan. Adia, who had remained uncharacteristically quiet since their arrival in this dimensional pocket, suddenly pointed to the view screen. Hate to interrupt the strategy session, but we might have a more immediate problem. The swirling void beyond the ship was changing, the crystalline structures of frozen time beginning to fracture and dissolve. Their dimensional pocket was collapsing, like an aftereffect of the intense temporal dimensional energies released during Ben's battle with Eon. We need to leave, Charmcaster stated urgently. This pocket dimension is destabilizing. To where? Kai asked the practical question. We don't know where we are relative to Earth, and we can't return to the quantum realm with the Observer Prime hunting for us. Ben looked down at the void Omnitrix, which had recharged enough to pulse with steady energy once more. Despite everything that had happened, he felt a growing synchronicity with the device, as though their connection deepened with each crisis overcome. I think it can get us home, he said with quiet certainty. But we'll need to work together again. Like the neural synchronization during the battle, Elena questioned, her analytical mind already formulating theories about the mechanism involved. Ben nodded. Exactly like that, but voluntary this time. Each of you has knowledge or abilities that could help navigate the dimensional currents. A collective consciousness directed through the void Omnitrix, Nyancy mused, her expression brightening with fascination. Cats do something similar when they dream together. It's how they patrol dimensional boundaries in their sleep. Adia rolled her eyes. Sure, cat girl, let's all take a nap together and dream our way home. Not literally dreaming, Charmcaster interjected, understanding dawning in her eyes. But a temporary merging of consciousness, directed through Ben as a focal point. She turned to him with sudden intensity. That's what happened during the battle, wasn't it? The void Omnitrix used you as a conduit for our combined knowledge. Ben met her gaze with matching intensity. Yes, and I think we can replicate it deliberately. Around them, the dimensional pocket continued deteriorating. Through fractures in reality, they could glimpse fragments of various dimensions, none recognizable as Earth, but some showing tantalizingly familiar physical laws. We don't have many options, Kai observed grimly. Ship systems can't navigate these dimensional currents, they don't follow any recognizable pattern. Luma had been analyzing sensor data with methodical precision. I detect a dimensional frequency approximately 0.7 parsecs distant that shares 92% commonality with Earth's baseline reality. That's our target then, Ben decided. Everyone, gather around. They formed a circle on the command deck. Ben, Charmcaster, Elena, Adia, Luma, Nyancy, and Kai. Even Corporal Sachs, who had maintained professional silence throughout their ordeal, joined. The formation at Adia's impatient gesture. How exactly does this work? Elena asked, her scientific mindset requiring at least a theoretical framework. Focus on home, Ben instructed simply. Picture Earth, remember its feel. Its dimensional signature. The Void Omnitrix will use those collective memories to navigate. That's not very scientific, Adia muttered, though she closed her eyes along with the others. Sometimes the universe isn't, Nyansi replied serenely. Ben activated the Void Omnitrix, selecting a transformation that appeared in the display as a swirling vortex rather than a distinct alien silhouette. As the energy enveloped him, he felt not the usual transformation process but something deeper, as though his consciousness was expanding to include the others. Their minds connected through the Void Omnitrix's dimensional interface, not reading thoughts or memories directly, but creating a harmonized consciousness that combined their essential understanding of reality. Through this collective awareness, Ben could perceive dimensional pathways invisible to individual perception. His transformed state became something beyond conventional description, not quite material, not entirely energy, but a focal point for their combined dimensional awareness. The ship itself responded, its hull resonating with the same frequency as they directed their collective will toward the Earth-like dimensional signature Luma had identified. Reality bent around them as the ship accelerated through collapsing dimensional boundaries, riding currents of possibility between fracturing timelines. Through their shared perception, they navigated instinctively, Charmcaster's magical awareness identifying dimensional harmonics, Alina's technological understanding calculating transitional vectors, Luma's scientific knowledge providing gravitational corrections, Nyansi's dimensional intuition sensing hidden pathways, Kai's adaptability finding routes through collapsing sections, Eve and Adia's aggressive confidence pushing them through barriers that might otherwise have seemed impassable. The journey seemed to last both moments and eternities, time itself becoming meaningless as EY traversed the spaces between dimensions. Glimpses of countless realities flashed past, some nearly identical to their own, others wildly divergent, all connected by the underlying mathematics of the multiverse. Then suddenly, with a sensation like breaking through the surface after being submerged in deep water, they emerged into clear blue sky, the familiar sprawl of Tokyo visible below them. The dimensional breach that had started their journey nowhere to be seen. Their shared consciousness gently disconnected as Ben reverted to human form, each mind returning to individual awareness with lingering echoes of their temporary union. No one spoke immediately, the profound experience of collective consciousness leaving them momentarily without adequate words. Kai was the first to recover her professional composure. Quickly checking navigation systems. We're back on Earth. Tokyo airspace, approximately 12 hours after we left. She paused, studying additional readings. The dimensional breach is gone. Not gone, Ben corrected, somehow knowing this with certainty. Dormant. Eon's dimensional circuit is still forming, we've just disrupted this node temporarily. Which means he'll try again elsewhere. Elena concluded, her nanites already compiling data from their dimensional transit. Charmcaster moved to stand beside Ben, her expression reflecting the lingering connection they'd shared during their collective consciousness. We need to identify the pattern of breaches, find where he'll strike next before he completes the circuit. I can help with that, Nyansi offered unexpectedly. My perception of dimensional frequencies was enhanced in the quantum realm. I can sense disturbances others can't detect. Luma nodded approval, combined with my gravitational analysis and the archaeologist's historical knowledge of breach sites, we could triangulate potential targets. Great, Adia remarked with sarcastic brightness that didn't entirely mask her genuine interest. Looks like I'm stuck with you people until this dimensional nonsense is resolved. She glanced at Corporal Sachs. Consider your assignment extended, Corporal. The guard nodded stoically, seeming unperturbed by the interdimensional adventure he'd been drawn into. As the others began discussing immediate priorities, Ben found a moment of relative privacy near the viewport. The Tokyo skyline spread beneath them, blissfully unaware of how close it had come to dimensional catastrophe. The Void Omnitrix pulsed steadily against his wrist, somehow feeling more integrated with his being after their shared consciousness experience. He sensed rather than heard Charmcaster approach, her magical awareness likely picking up on his contemplative mood. Quite the team we've assembled, she observed, her voice carrying a hint of amused irony. A sorceress, a nanite specialist, a tetraman scientist, an Inkerseen princess, a dimension-hopping cat woman, and an archaeologist. All centered around you and that device on your wrist. Ben smiled slightly. When you put it that way, it sounds ridiculous. The most powerful things often do, she replied. Her silver hair caught the sunlight as she turned to face him directly. During our merged consciousness, I felt something unusual. The void Omnitrix connecting us. Ben suggested. No, Charmcaster said, her gaze holding his with unexpected vulnerability. Something more specific. When our minds joined, certain connections seemed stronger than others. The implication hung between them, an acknowledgement of something that had been wielding since their reunion in the Egyptian temple. Their shared experiences facing dimensional chaos, the mutual respect that had evolved from former enmity, the undeniable pull that seemed to draw them together in moments of both crisis and calm. Before Ben could formulate a response that addressed the complex emotions involved, Kai called from the command console. I'm detecting a transmission from Plumber headquarters. Magister Tennyson is requesting immediate debriefing. The moment passed, reality reasserting its practical demands. Ben gave Charmcaster a look that promised their conversation would continue later. Then moved to join the others on the command deck. As they prepared to return to Plumber headquarters, Ben recognized that their team, this unlikely assemblage of powerful, brilliant women from across species and dimensions, represented something unprecedented in his experience. Not just allies against a cosmic threat, but individuals whose lives had become intertwined with his in ways that transcended professional cooperation. The void Omnitrix pulsed against his wrist, as though acknowledging this realization. Whatever challenges lay ahead in their fight against Eon and the dimensional collapse, they would face them together, connected now by experiences that defied conventional understanding and relationships that crossed boundaries more complex than merely those between dimensions. Chapter 3. Beyond the Boundaries. Plumber headquarters hummed with subdued tension. The central command room, normally ordered and methodical, had transformed into a nexus of interdimensional analysis. Holographic displays showed fracture patterns across reality, time-lapse progressions of breach events, and probability models of future collapses. Ben stood at the center of this organized chaos, the void Omnitrix pulsing in rhythm with the dimensional scanners. 3 days had passed since their return from Tokyo. 3 days of preparation, analysis, and the quiet before an inevitable storm. The pattern is unmistakable now, Kai said, manipulating the central holographic display where red markers indicated confirmed breach points across Earth and neighboring dimensions. Quote, Eon is creating a dodecahedral structure, 12 major nodes connected across dimensional boundaries. 9 completed, Elena added from her workstation, nanites flowing between her fingertips as they processed vast datasets. 3 remaining, with the next predicted to form within 6 hours. Magister Tennyson, who had witnessed many threats to reality during his long career but still found this particular crisis uniquely concerning, studied the projection with narrowed eyes. Location. That's where it gets complicated, Luma interjected, her forearms operating separate analytical interfaces with effortless coordination. The Tetraman Princess had officially registered as a scientific consultant to the plumbers, her gravitational expertise proving invaluable. The dimensional coordinate suggest 3 potential manifestation points. She expanded the hologram, highlighting 3 locations: a remote area in the Sahara Desert, the depths of the Marianas Trench, and the crowded heart of Bellwood. He's getting better at masking his signature, Nyancy observed, her feline-enhanced senses perceiving patterns in the data invisible to conventional analysis. She perched cross-legged atop a console, much to the annoyance of the regular plumber technicians. The cat in me says he's creating false trails. And the human in you? Ben asked, a hint of a smile touching his lips despite the gravity of their situation. Nyancy's eyes, now permanently exhibiting the geometric patterns she'd acquired in the quantum realm, gleamed with predatory focus. The human in me says he's playing with us. These aren't just strategic points, they're personal. She's right, Charmcaster agreed, entering the command center with measured steps. Silver hair tied back pragmatically, hands marked with fresh runic tattoos that enhanced her magical perception. Eon doesn't just want power, he wants to defeat you specifically, Ben. These locations have significance. Ben turned toward her, their eyes eating with the unspoken understanding that had deepened since their shared consciousness experience. Bellwood is obvious, my hometown. The Sahara contains ruins connected to the original Omnitrix discovery. But the Marianas Trench, site of your first encounter with an interdimensional entity, Adia supplied unexpectedly from where she lounged against the far wall. The Inkersine Princess, Officii, ally registered as a political asylum seeker rather than admit she was voluntarily helping, straightened as attention shifted to her. What? I read your file. Know your enemies and all that. We're not enemies anymore, Adia. Ben pointed out. She made a dismissive gesture. Details. Point is, fishy enough to be a trap, which means all three are probably traps, which means typical boring villain redundancy. Or typical brilliant strategy, Elena countered, her analytical mind recognizing the elegance in Eon's approach. By forcing us to divide our resources across three potential sites, e.g. Aren't we'll be understaffed at the actual breach point. Magister Tennyson activated the command center's secure communication system. Then we don't divide our resources. We deploy specialized teams to monitor each location, but keep our primary response unit mobile and ready to converge on whichever site shows actual breach activity. Ben nodded approval at his grandfather's strategy. We'll need transportation faster than conventional methods if we're going to respond in time. Already solved, Charmcaster stated with quiet confidence. She approached the central platform, removing a small pouch from her belt. With precise movements, she emptied its contents, 7 crystalline shards that pulsed with magenta energy, onto the display surface. Dimensional anchor points, paired stones attuned to each location. They'll allow instant translocation regardless of distance. Magical teleportation, Elena observed, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her usual skepticism toward mystical solutions. Her nanites drifted toward the crystals, sensing their energy signature. The quantum entanglement principles are fascinating. Practical as what they are, Adia remarked, pushing herself away from the wall with newfound interest. Much better than being stuck in some cramped transport together. No offense, but some of you could use better personal hygiene. Her amphibian yes flicked meaningfully toward Corporal Sachs, who stood at perpetual attention nearby. The corporal has been maintaining standard Inkersine military cleanliness protocols, Luma noted with clinical precision. Entirely missing the intended humor. Nyancy's enhanced hearing picked up Ben's suppressed laugh, her own lips curving in response. The dynamics within their unlikely team had evolved over the past days, initial tensions giving way to functional cooperation and, in some cases, genuine camaraderie. Even Adia's provocations had softened into something closer to friendly teasing than genuine hostility. The crystals will work, Charmcaster continued, unperturbed by the exchange. But they require focus and clarity to activate. Emotional turbulence can disrupt the translocation. Her EYs met Ben's briefly as she said this, a loaded glance that referenced their still unresolved conversation from the Tokyo return. The growing connection between them remained acknowledged but unexplored. Both prioritizing the dimensional crisis above personal matters. Then we maintain focus, Ben stated simply, addressing both the tactical concern and the unspoken personal context. Teams will deploy to monitoring positions at each site, maintain constant communication, and stand ready for immediate convergence when we identify the actual breach point. Magister Tennyson nodded approval. I'll coordinate from headquarters with a rapid response unit on standby. He surveyed the assembled group with undisguised pride despite their unconventional nature. You've all performed admirably under extraordinary circumstances. Earth, and multiple dimensions, owe you a debt of gratitude. Save the medal ceremony for after we prevent multiversal collapse, Adia quipped, though her posture stray. Tend almost imperceptibly at the praise. We deploy in 1 hour, Ben decided. Everyone gear up and prepare for extended field operations. As the command center activity intensified with preparation protocols, Ben found a moment of relative quiet near the peripheral monitoring stations. The void Omnitrix pulsed steadily against his wrist, its integration with his biological systems now so complete that he sometimes forgot where the device ended and he began. He sensed Charmcaster's approach before seeing her, another sign of how the void Omnitrix had enhanced his perception of magical energies. Your grandfather seems remarkably untroubled by assembling a team that includes 3 former enemies, an interdimensional cat woman, and an alien princess seeking asylum, she observed, her tone carrying the dry humor that had become increasingly evident as her guard lowered around him. "He's adaptable," Ben replied with a slight smile. "Comes with the territory when your grandson repeatedly saves reality." "Speaking of adaptable," she continued, her expression growing more serious, "the Void Omnitrix is changing you, Ben. Not just physically or in terms of capabilities. Your aura has shifted. It's becoming more multifaceted. As though you're existing partially across dimensional frequencies even in human form." Ben considered this, flexing his hand and noting the faint trails of energy only he could see following the movement. "I feel it, like I'm more connected to everything. Not just alien DNA or transformation potential, but the underlying structure of reality itself." Charmcaster nodded, unsurprised. "It's similar to how practitioners of dimensional magic evolve over time. Extended exposure to multiversal energies changes perception permanently." Her voice softened slightly. "It can be isolating, seeing what others cannot." The observation carried personal weight. Charmcaster had walked a solitary path for years, her magical perceptions setting her apart from both humans and many other magic users. "Maybe that's why," Ben began, then stopped himself. "Why what?" she prompted, stepping closer. Ben met her gaze directly. "Why I feel more connected to you than before. Beyond just fighting together or shared experiences. Something more fundamental." The admission hung between them, not quite a declaration, but an acknowledgement of the deepening bond neither had fully addressed since Tokyo. Charmcaster's expression shifted subtly, vulnerability briefly visible beneath her cultivated composure. "Dimensional resonance," she suggested, though her tone indicated she believed it was something more. "People who've experienced similar multiversal exposures often develop synchronized energy patterns. Is that what we're calling it?" Ben asked, a hint of gentle challenge in his voice. Before she could respond, Elena approached, her tactful cough announcing her presence before interrupting their moment. "We have movement on the Mariana's site. Subtle gravitational fluctuations consistent with pre-breach conditions." The personal conversation dissolved into professional focus with practiced ease. "Alert the others," Ben instructed. "We deploy now rather than wait for confirmation." Within minutes, the specialized team had gathered in the transport bay. Equipment checked, communications tested, strategy reviewed one final time. 7 individuals with diverse backgrounds and abilities, united by purpose and the shared understanding that reality itself depended on their success. Charmcaster distributed the anchor crystals, one to each team member. "Focus on your destination. Visualize the coordinates precisely. The crystal will do the rest." "And if we end up materialized inside a rock formation?" Adia asked skeptically. "The spell accounts for physical obstacles." Charmcaster replied with practiced patience. "But perhaps focus extra hard, just in case." Nyancy stifled a laugh, her enhanced senses catching the subtle humor in Charmcaster's deadpan delivery. Ben activated his communicator one final time. "All monitoring stations, maintain alert status. If conditions change at any location, notify headquarters immediately." He surveyed his team with quiet confidence. "See you at the breach point." 7 crystals activated simultaneously, 7 bodies dissolved into particles of light, and the transport bay stood empty. Ben materialized on the deck of a plumber vessel positioned above the Mariana's Trench, the deepest point in Earth's oceans. Dark water stretched in every direction, churning with unusual patterns that defied standard meteorological explanation. The sky above roiled with clouds that formed and dissolved in unnatural sequences. Within moments, the others appeared beside him: Charmcaster, Elena, Adia, Luma, Nyancy, and Kai. Each immediately moved to their designated positions with the coordination of a team that had trained together far longer than their actual association. Readings confirm gravitational anomalies consistent with dimensional thinning. Kai reported, activating specialized monitoring equipment. Depth approximately 10,900 meters, near the Challenger Deep. "That's beyond standard diving range," Elena noted. Her nanites already reconfiguring to create specialized deep-sea protective systems. Even with enhanced equipment, the pressure at that depth would be problematic. "For humans, perhaps," Luma stated. Her Tetraman physiology naturally resistant to extreme conditions. "My species routinely operates in environments exceeding 1,000 atmospheres of pressure." "Show off," Adia muttered, Huff, her amphibian features displayed interest rather than genuine annoyance. Incursines have natural adaptations for aquatic environments as well, though not necessarily at crushing depths. Ben studied the void Omnitrix, which pulsed with increasing frequency as it detected the dimensional disturbance below. We need eyes on the actual breach point to confirm this is Eon's target and not a diversion. I can send nanite probes down, Elena offered, already dispatching microscopic scouts from her fingertips. They'll transmit real-time data from the disturbance. Nyancy moved to the vessel's edge, her geometric eyes focused on patterns invisible to the others. There's something else happening here. The dimensional frequency feels unstable. Different from Tokyo. How different? Ben asked, trusting her enhanced perception. Like it's being filtered through another reality first, she replied, frowning in concentration. Almost as if. Her explanation was cut short as the entire vessel shuddered violently. The ocean beneath them bulged upward unnaturally, water behaving as though solid matter as it formed impossible shapes. Breach initiating, Kai called out, her monitoring equipment blaring warnings. But the pattern is inverted, energy flowing outward rather than creating a vacuum. Ben activated the void Omnitrix, already cycling to find an appropriate transformation. Everyone, defensive positions. This isn't just a breach, it's an invasion point. The ocean erupted before them, not with water but with a swirling vortex of temporal energy. From within this dimensio, Null-wound emerged armored figures, dozens of them, each bearing the unmistakable design aesthetic of Eon's forces. Temporal mercenaries equipped with dimensional phase technology, their weapons already charging with lethal intent. Chrono troopers, Charmcaster identified, magical energy flaring around her hands. Eon's personal army recruited from collapsed timelines. Which means this is definitely not the main breach point. Elena concluded, her analytical mind immediately grasping the tactical implication. It's a diversion. The realization came too late. The chrono troopers opened fire. Temporal disruption blasts impacting the vessel's shields with reality warping force. Simultaneously, the anchor crystals they had used for transportation shattered in perfect synchronicity, according to TED attack across dimensional frequencies. He's cut off our escape route, Kai shouted over the sudden chaos, already returning fire with modified plumber weapons. Ben slammed down the void Omnitrix, transforming into void diamond, the crystalline form enhanced with dimensional properties. No, he's divided our forces. Try to contact the monitoring stations at the other locations. All communications attempts failed, blocked by sophisticated temporal interference. As the battle intensified on the vessel's deck, the strategic picture became devastatingly clear. They had been manipulated into depth, luring their full team to a secondary target while Eon pursued his true objective elsewhere. Luma engaged the chrono troopers directly, her forearms allowing her to combat multiple opponents simultaneously. These soldiers fight with unusual coordination, as though controlled by a singular consciousness. That's exactly what they are, Charmcaster confirmed, creating magical barriers to deflect temporal blasts. Extensions of Eons will across the multiverse. Adia demonstrated surprising combat effectiveness, her amphibian agility allowing her to evade attacks while delivering precise counter-strikes. Less talking, more fighting. We need to finish these goons and get to the real breach. Nyancy's enhanced perception suddenly detected a pattern in the chrono troopers' movements. They're not trying to defeat us, she realized. Their containment formation. They're keeping us occupied. Ben immediately recognized the tactical implications. Which means the real breach is happening right now somewhere else. The void Omnitrix pulsed urgently against his crystalline form, as though attempting to communicate crucial information. We need to break through and regroup. Elena's Nanites had formed a defensive perimeter around the vessel, analyzing and adapting to the temporal weapons with remarkable speed. I'm detecting a pattern in their phase technology, she called out. If we can disrupt their synchronization frequency, I can create a counter-resonance spell, Charmcaster finished, already weaving complex magical patterns. But I'll need time and concentration. You've got it, Ben affirmed, reconfiguring his void diamond form to create a crystalline dome around Charmcaster and Elena. Luma, Adia, offensive perimeter. Kai, Nyancy, identify any weakness in their deployment pattern. The improvised strategy coalesced with practiced efficiency despite the chaos. Each team member executed their role with precision born from their diverse expertise and the shared consciousness experience that had subtly enhanced their coordination. Within the protective dome, Charmcaster and Elena worked in perfect synchronicity, magic and technology interweaving as they developed a countermeasure against the Chrono Troopers' dimensional phase technology. Nanites flowed through magical constructs, enhancing and distributing the effect while adapting to the unique energy signatures. Ready, Elena announced after intense minutes of collaborative development. But we'll only get one chance. The disruption will be temporary. Ben nodded, understanding the implication. Eve, Ryan, prepare for immediate action on my mark. When their synchronization drops, we create an opening and determine the location of the true breach point. The Chrono Troopers continued their relentless assault, their numbers seemingly inexhaustible as new soldiers phased into existence to replace fallen comrades. The vessel's shields were failing under the sustained temporal bombardment, reality itself becoming unstable around the battlefield. Now, Ben commanded. Elena and Charmcaster released their combined countermeasure, a wave of nanite-enhanced magical energy that spread outward at multidimensional frequencies. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Chrono Troopers froze mid-attack, their temporal synchronization disrupted and connection to Eon temporarily severed. Ben immediately reverted to human form, the void Omnitrix recalibrating as he accessed its dimensional perception capabilities. With the temporal interference momentarily neutralized, he could sense the multiverse more clearly, and the true breach point blazed like a beacon across dimensional boundaries. Bellwood, he announced with grim certainty. The real target was Bellwood all along. The convergence point, T, is directly beneath Plumber headquarters. Of course it is, Adia growled, dispatching a final Chrono Trooper with efficient brutality. Villain 101, attack the symbolic center of resistance. Our transportation crystals are destroyed. Kai reminded them, the tactical reality of their situation override any relief from the momentary victory. We're thousands of miles from Bellwood with no rapid transit option. The Chrono Troopers were already beginning to resynchronize, their movements becoming more coordinated as Eon re-established control across temporal frequencies. I can get us there, Ben stated with quiet confidence. The void Omnitrix pulsing with renewed energy as he selected a transformation unlike any he had previously attempted. Everyone, gather close. As the team formed a tight circle around him, Ben activated the transformation sequence. The energy that enveloped him was different, not merely changing his physical form but extending outward to encompass the entire group. They felt reality shift around them, their very molecules seeming to disengage from conventional physical laws. Void Transit, Ben named the form as the transformation completed. His appearance defied simple description, a humanoid figure composed of interlocking dimensional gateways, each revealing glimpses of different realities. His voice echoed from multiple spatial coordinates simultaneously. Hold together. This will feel unusual. With that significant understatement, Ben initiated their dimensional transit. Unlike their previous experiences of dimensional travel, this felt calculated and controlled, a precise movement through the underlying structure of reality rather than a chaotic plunge between worlds. They existed briefly as probability patterns rather than physical matter. Their consciousness maintained through Ben's focused will and the void Omnitrix's dimensional manipulation capabilities. Through this state, they perceived the multiverse as an interconnected infinite realities existing simultaneously, each a variation on fundamental patterns. Then, with a sensation of reality reasserting its conventional laws, they materialized in Bellwood, specifically in the Central Park approximately half a mile from Plumber headquarters. The transition from oceanic battlefield to urban environment was so abrupt that several team members momentarily struggled to reorient themselves. Ben reverted to human form, the complex transformation having drained significant energy from the void Omnitrix. Sorry for the rough arrival, he managed, steadying himself against a nearby tree. Still figuring out the navigation aspects of that form. You just teleported 7 people across thousands of miles through dimensional shortcuts, Nyancy observed with genuine admiration. I'd say a little disorientation is a reasonable trade-off. Their momentary recovery was interrupted by the unmistakable sounds of chaos erupting from the direction of Plumber headquarters. The sky above the disguised facility swirled with unnatural energy patterns, violet and crimson temporal distortions forming a vortex that expanded with every passing second. The final breach, Charmcaster identified, her magical senses interpreting the phenomena with practiced expertise. Eon is completing his dimensional circuit. Not if we stop him first, Ben stated, already moving toward the disturbance with determined strides. The others fell into formation around him, their diverse capabilities preparing for the confrontation ahead. No discussion was needed regarding strategy or ACH. Their shared experiences had forged an intuitive understanding that transcended conventional team dynamics. They encountered the outer perimeter of the disturbance 3 blocks from Plumber Headquarters, a zone where reality itself had begun to destabilize. Ordinary citizens fled in confusion as sidewalks rippled like liquid, buildings phased partially out of normal space-time, and gravity fluctuated unpredictably. Plumber emergency protocols had activated, evacuation teams guiding civilians away from the affected area while specialized containment units attempted to establish a perimeter. They recognized Ben and his team immediately, relief evident even through their professional demeanor. Magister Tennyson is inside, one officer reported, gesturing toward the headquarters building which now pulsed with temporal energy. Eon breached our defenses 20 minutes ago. Communications are down, and we've lost contact with all internal teams. Ben nodded grimly. Establish a 3-blow CK evacuation zone and prepare for potential dimensional instability. We'll handle Eon. The plumber nodded, not questioning Ben's authority despite the unusual composition of his team. Years of Witna, SSING Tennyson solutions to impossible problems had established a certain operational faith. As they approached headquarters, the dimensional distortions intensified. The building itself existed partially across multiple realities, sections phasing in and out of normal perception. Through these dimensional windows, they glimpsed versions of the facility from alternate timelines, some intact and operational, others abandoned or destroyed. The dimensional circuit is nearly complete, Elena observed, her nanites analyzing the energy patterns surrounding the structure. These readings suggest we Avenue less than 15 minutes before full convergence. What happens at full convergence? Adia questioned, her typical bravado momentarily subdued by the apocalyptic implications. Reality fractures permanently, Charmcaster answered grimly. Dimensions bleed together in chaotic patterns rather than structured overlaps. Essentially, the end of coherent existence as we understand it. Unless that's precisely what Eon wants, Luma suggested, her scientific mind perceiving the underlying pattern. These energy configurations suggest a controlled collapse rather than random deterioration. He's creating a dimensional forge, Nyancy realized, her enhanced perceptions comprehending the ultimate strategy. A crucible where he can reshape reality according to his own design. Ben studied the void Omnitrix, which pulsed with increasing urgency as they approached the convergence point. And he needs this to complete the process, he concluded. The void Omnitrix is the final component, a 2-OL capable of stabilizing his new reality once the original dimensional boundaries have been erased. Then we keep it away from him, Kai stated with practical determination. And shut down his operation before the circuit completes. They entered the transformed headquarters through a reality fracture that bypassed conventional entry points. Inside, the familiar corridors and chambers had become a labyrinth of temporal distortions, paths that led to different points in the facility's timeline, rooms that existed across multiple dimensional frequencies simultaneously. Alina's nanites formed a protective field around the group, adapting to the unstable dimensional conditions. I'm detecting multiple life signs throughout the complex, but the temporal distortions make precise location impossible. We don't need precision, Ben replied, the void Omnitrix guiding his perception through the chaos. Eon will be at the center of the convergence, the dimensional fulcrum where all realities intersect. The null void projection chamber, Charmcaster realized. It's already designed to interface with another dimension. They navigated the twisted interior landscape with Ben's dimensional perception and Charmcaster's magical senses guiding their path. Occasionally they encountered plumber personnel frozen in temporal stasis, victims of Eon's advance through the facility. Kai checked each briefly, confirming they were suspended rather than harmed, their timelines temporarily paused rather than terminated. As they approached the central chambers, they began encountering Chrono Troopers I.N. defensive formations, more sophisticated and better equipped than those they had faced at the Mariana's diversion. These elite guards engaged with coordinated precision, their temporal weapons capable of erasing opponents from the timeline entirely. The team responded with equally impressive coordination. Luma and Adia formed the frontline offense, their natural physical capabilities enhanced by Alina's nanite protections. Charmcaster provided magical countermeasures against the temporal weapons, while Niance's enhanced perceptions identified vulnerabilities in the Chrono Troopers' deployment patterns. Kai utilized her archaeological knowledge of ancient weapons systems, now adapted into plumber technology, with devastating effectiveness. Ben shifted between various void transformations as needed, each form bringing unique capabilities to the evolving battle. Through it all, the team moved with a synchronicity that transcended their limited time working together, a harmony of purpose, and execution that made them formidable beyond their individual abilities. They reached the null void chamber to find it transformed almost beyond recognition. The projection technology had been modified with components from multiple dimensions, creating a nexus point where realities converged in controlled patterns. At the center stood Eon, his armor enhanced with temporal components that pulsed with harvested dimensional energy. More concerning was the figure suspended within the modified projection field, Magister Tennyson, his timeline partially extracted and feeding into Eon's dimensional circuit. "Grandfather," Ben called out, instinctively stepping forward before Charmcaster's restraining hand on his arm stopped him. "Careful," she warned. "The dimensional boundaries are at their thinnest here. One misstep could send you cascading through multiple realities." Eon turned at their arrival, his masked face revealing nothing but his voice carrying unmistakable satisfaction. "Right on schedule, Benjamin. I was concerned my diversion might have been too obvious, but your predictable heroism never disappoints." "Release my grandfather," Ben demanded, the void Omnitrix pulsing aggressively against his wrist. "And shut down this convergence before you destabilize the entire multiverse." "Destabilize," Eon repeated with genuine amusement. "Such limited perspective. I'm not destroying the multiverse, I'm evolving it. Creating a new dimensional paradigm where the arbitrary boundaries between realities no longer constrain existence. With yourself as the central consciousness," Elena concluded, her analytical mind immediately grasping his ultimate objective. "You're not just harvesting dimensional energy, you're positioning yourself as the nexus point of a new multiversal order." "Precisely," Eon confirmed, genuine respect coloring his tone. "Your nanite-enhanced intellect perceives what others cannot. In the new reality paradigm, consciousness itself becomes the organizing principle rather than arbitrary physical laws or dimensional boundaries. And everyone else just gets erased in the process." Adia challenged, her amphibian features contorted with disgust. "Even by Inkersine standards, that's messed up." Quote, Eon made a dismissive gesture. "Not erased, transformed. Those with sufficient dimensional resonance will adapt to the new paradigm. Those without," he shrugged. "Evolution always has casualties." Throughout this exchange, Ben had been analyzing the dimensional circuit with his enhanced perception. The modified null-void projector formed the central node of a 12-point configuration, each connection feeding temporal energy into the convergence point. Magister Tennyson's partially extracted timeline provided the stabilizing influence, an anchor point of personal significance to Ben specifically. "You need the void Omnitrix to complete the process," Ben stated, not a question but a confirmation of what his enhanced perception had already determined. "That's why you manipulated events to lead me to it in the first place." "Very good, Benjamin," Eon praised condescendingly. "The void Omnitrix is the culmination of thousands of careful manipulations across multiple timelines. I guided your discovery of it, ensured your compatibility, even arranged for the specific threats that would accelerate its integration with your biological systems. You caused the dimensional breaches in Legerdemain," Charmcaster realized, anger flaring in her violet eyes. "My uncle was just another pawn in your game. As was the Observer Prime," Eon confirmed without remorse. "All playing their roles perfectly to bring us to this moment, the final convergence where all possibilities collapse into a single, perfect reality." The dimensional circuit pulsed with increasing intensity, the countdown to completion evident in the accelerating energy patterns. They had minutes, perhaps less, before Eon's plan reached its irreversible conclusion. Ben exchanged glances with his team. unspoken strategy forming through their enhanced connection. With subtle nods and minimal gestures, they confirmed their approach, a coordinated response to prevent completion of THE circuit while extracting Magister Tennyson from the convergence field. "There's just one problem with your perfect plan," Ben stated, keeping Eon's attention focused on him as the others moved into position with careful precision. "You've made the classic villain mistake. And what might that be?" Eon asked with genuine curiosity. Ben allowed himself a small smile, monologuing instead of winning. On that signal, the team executed their coordinated attack. Luma and Adia launched simultaneous strikes at opposite nodes of the dimensional circuit, disrupting the energy flow patterns. Elena's nanites swarmed into the modified projector systems, infiltrating control mechanisms and introducing calculated errors into the convergence algorithms. Charmcaster targeted the temporal field holding Magister Tennyson, her magic specifically calibrated to counter Eon's timeline extraction process. Nyancy utilized her dimensional perception to identify and exploit weaknesses in the convergence structure, while Kai deployed specialized plumber technology designed to stabilize reality fluctuations. Eon reacted with the speed and precision of a being who existed partially outside normal temporal constraints. Waves of chrono energy erupted from his armor, countering their attacks with calculated efficiency. The dimensional circuit flickered but stabilized, his control over the convergence process too sophisticated to be easily disrupted. "Admirable coordination," he acknowledged, genuine appreciation in his voice despite the opposition. "Your team has evolved beyond my projections. Perhaps some of you might survive the transition after all." Ben activated the Void Omnitrix, transforming into Void Walker, the form that existed across multiple dimensional frequencies simultaneously. In this state, he could perceive the underlying structure of Eon's convergence circuit more clearly, identifying its fundamental vulnerability. The primary node, he communicated to the team, his voice resonating across both verbal and multidimensional channels. "It's not the projector, it's Eon himself. His chronological signature is the keystone holding the entire configuration together. Then we target Eon directly," Charmcaster responded, redirecting her magical assault. The battle intensified as they concentrated their efforts on Eon himself rather than the surrounding technology. The Time Manipulator responded with increasing defensive measures, drawing power directly from the dimensional convergence to enhance his capabilities. Reality fluctuated violently around them as the conflict escalated, sections of the chamber phasing between different dimensional states. Through it all, the countdown to complete convergence continued, now mere minutes from irreversible activation. Ben navigated the chaotic dimensional battlefield with increasing mastery of his Void Walker form, engaging Eon directly while the others maintained pressure on different aspects of the convergence circuit. Their coordination was impressive but insufficient against Eon's accumulated power and millennium of experience manipulating temporal forces. With a particularly powerful chronological pulse, Eon temporarily dispersed their offensive formation, creating the opening he needed. Moving with calculated precision, he activated the final sequence in his dimensional circuit. "The convergence cannot be stopped," he declared as the chamber filled with intensifying energy. "The only choice remaining is adaptation or erasure." The Void Omnitrix pulsed with unprecedented urgency against Ben's multidimensional form, communicating something beyond conventional understanding. In that moment of connection, Ben perceived the true nature of the device and its purpose, not merely a tool for transformation or dimensional navigation, but a focal point for reality itself. Understanding crystallized with sudden clarity. He reverted to human form, the Void Omnitrix glowing with accumulated dimensional energy. "You're right about one thing, Eon," Ben stated with calm certainty. "The convergence can't be stopped, but it can be redirected." Before Eon could respond, Ben activated a previously inaccessible function within the Void Omnitrix, one that had remained dormant until this precise moment of multiversal significance. The device responded by expanding its influence beyond conventional dimensional boundaries, establishing a counter-resonance to Eon's convergence circuit. "No," Eon shouted, genuine alarm replacing his previous confidence. "You don't understand what you're doing, Benjamin. The dimensional energies must follow my established pattern or reality itself will unravel." "Not unravel," Ben corrected, the Void Omnitrix's energy spreading through the chamber in patterns that counterbalanced Aeon's design. Rebalance. Understanding dawned in Charmcaster's expression. The Void Omnitrix isn't just responding to the convergence, it's reconfiguring it. Establishing a natural dimensional harmony instead of an artificial construct. We need to stabilize the transitional phase, Elena added, her nanites already adapting to support the Omnitrix's reconfiguration pattern. Otherwise the energy Y discharge could cascade unpredictably across dimensional boundaries. The team immediately shifted from offense to collaborative stabilization, each contributing their unique capabilities to support Ben's unprecedented manipulation of multiversal forces. Charmcaster's magic reinforced dimensional boundaries, Elena's nanites regulated energy flows, Luma's gravitational expertise countered spatial distortions. Niancy's perceptions identified critical junctures requiring stabilization, Kai deployed specialized containment fields, and even Adia contributed her surprisingly extensive knowledge of interdimensional pressure dynamics. Aeon fought against their efforts with increasing desperation, his carefully constructed convergence circuit being systematically reconfigured by the Void Omnitrix's intervention. Millennia of preparation, he raged. You cannot simply rewrite the fundamental pattern. That's exactly what we're doing, Ben responded, the Void Omnitrix drawing more heavily on his life force as it channeled unprecedented dimensional energies. The strain was evident in his voice and posture, but his determination remained unshaken. Rewriting your artificial convergence with something more natural, the way dimensions are supposed to interact. The chamber became the epicenter of multiversal reconfiguration as two opposing dimensional paradigms competed for dominance, Aeon's controlled hierarchical design versus the organic, balanced pattern established by the Void Omnitrix and supported by the diverse team surrounding Ben. Magister Tennyson, partially freed from the temporal extraction field by Charmcaster's earlier efforts, managed to speak despite his weakened condition. The containment fields, Ben. They need to be inverted to channel the excess energy. Kai immediately understood, adjusting the plumber technology accordingly. Converting from containment to redirection. The modification created a critical breakthrough, providing a necessary outlet for the tremendous energies being generated by the competing dimensional paradigms. The balance shifted perceptibly toward Ben's configuration, Aeon's carefully constructed circuit beginning to unravel under the pressure of a more natural multiversal harmony. Aeon made a final, desperate assault, concentrating all his accumulated chronological power into a direct attack on Ben and the Void Omnitrix. The Blah, Saint of pure temporal energy would have erased both from the timeline entirely if not for Charmcaster's intervention. Without hesitation, she interposed herself between Ben and the attack, channeling temporal energy through her own magical matrix. The cost was immediate and severe, her body beginning to phase between dimensional states as the conflicting forces threatened to tear her apart at a fundamental level. Hope, Ben called out, momentarily diverting his attention from the dimensional reconfiguration. Don't stop, she managed through the pain of molecular distortion. Finish the reconfiguration. Their eyes met across the chaotic dimensional battlefield, a moment of profound connection transcending the physical chaos surrounding them. Without words, Ben understood her sacrifice and its necessity. With renewed determination, he channeled everything into the Void Omnitrix's reconfiguration process, pushing beyond conventional limitations. The chamber erupted with blinding multiversal energy as the competing paradigms reached their climactic confrontation. For a moment that stretched across dimensional frequencies, reality itself seemed to hold its breath, infinite possibility. Collapsed into a singular decision point determining the multiverse's fundamental nature. Then, with a reality-shaking pulse that reverberated across dimensions, the balance shifted decisively. Aeon's artificial convergence circuit collapsed completely, overwhelmed by the natural harmonic established through the Void Omnitrix. The time manipulator himself screamed in fury and disbelief as his physical form began disintegrating, not destroyed but redistributed across the dimensional spectrum, his consciousness scattered rather than concentrated. This isn't defeat, his voice echoed as his form dissolved into temporal particles. Merely postponement. I exist across all timelines, Benjamin. Our conflict is eternal. With those final words, Aeon disappeared completely, not dead but dispersed. Beyond the capability for immediate reconstitution. The dimensional energies he had accumulated dissipated along natural pathways established by the Void Omnitrix, healing breaches and reinforcing boundaries across the multiverse. As the chaotic energies subsided, Ben immediately turned his attention to Charmcaster, who had collapsed from the strain of absorbing Eon's temporal attack. Her form C. Continued phasing erratically between dimensional states, silver hair floating in patterns that defied conventional physics. "She's dimensional shifting," Elena reported, her nanites already analyzing the condition. "The temporal energy disrupted her anchoring to our reality frequency. Can you stabilize her?" Ben asked urgently, kneeling beside Charmcaster's fluctuating form. Elena shook her head grimly. "This goes beyond technological intervention. The disruption is at a fundamental level of existence." The Void Omnitrix pulsed against Ben's wrist, drawing his attention. In his enhanced perceptual state, a permanent change resulting from his extended use of the device, he understood its communication without needing verbal interpretation. "I can follow her," he realized. "The Void Omnitrix can track her dimensional signature and bring her back." "That's suicide," Adia interjected with uncharacteristic concern. "You'd be navigating raw dimensional currents without established pathways. Even with that fancy watch, you could end up scattered across multiple realities." "She's right," Luma confirmed, her scientific assessment matching Adia's instinctive understanding. "The probability of successful retrieval and return is approximately 17.3%. Nyancy studied Ben with her geometric eyes, perceiving more than the others could see. "You're going anyway," she stated simply. Not a coup, estion but recognition of an already made decision. Ben nodded, the Void Omnitrix already recalibrating for the unprecedented journey. "Hope risked everything to save me, to save all of us. I'm not leaving her lost between dimensions." Magister Tennyson, now fully freed from Eon's extraction field, placed a hand on his grandson's shoulder. "The dimensional currents are still partially stabilized from the reconfiguration. If you're going to attempt this, now is the optimal time. We'll monitor your dimensional signature," Kai promised, already setting up the necessary equipment. "And maintain an anchor point for your return." Elena's nanites formed a temporary shell around Ben. "This won't last long in raw dimensional space, but it might provide minimal protection during the initial transition." As the team prepared what limited support they could offer for his dimensional pursuit, Ben knelt beside Charmcaster's fluctuating form one last time. Though her physical manifestation was increasingly unstable, her eyes focused on him with perfect clarity, awareness transcending conventional perception. "I'll find you," he promised simply. Her lips curved in a smile that phased between dimensional frequencies. "I know." With that exchange, profound in its simplicity, Ben activated the Void Omnitrix's most experimental function. His form dissolved into multidimensional energy as he surrendered red conventional existence to follow Charmcaster's dissipating dimensional signature into the spaces between realities. The experience defied description in conventional human language. Ben existed as consciousness without fixed form, perception without physical senses, will without material constraint. The Void Omnitrix became less a device and more an extension of his essential self, a framework for navigating the infinite dimensional currents of the multiverse. Through this transcendent state, he tracked Charmcaster's unique energy signature, a pattern as distinctive to his enhanced perceptio. N as her voice or appearance would be in conventional reality. She moved through dimensional frequencies like a leaf caught in complex currents, her consciousness intact but her form increasingly dispersed across multiple realities. Ben pursued with single-minded focus, his existence narrowed to this one purpose. Time became meaningless in this state. What felt like moments might have been hours or days in conventional reality. Distance similarly lost coherent meaning when movement occurred across dimensional frequencies rather than physical space. Eventually, he reached the dimensional eddy WH. Air Charmcaster's essence had become trapped, a recursive pattern preventing her from either fully dispersing or successfully reintegrating with any specific reality. Her consciousness recognized his approach, reaching out across the dimensional void separating them. No words were exchanged or needed. In this state, communication transcended conventional language. Understanding flowed directly between their essential selves, unmediated by physical limitations or linguistic constraints. Her gratitude, his determination, their shared connection, all existed as pure conceptual reality rather than articulated thought. With careful precision guided by the Void Omnitrix's dimensional manipulation capabilities, Ben began gathering Charmcaster's dispersed essence. The process required extraordinary focus, reassembling a specific pattern from multiversal chaos, restoring coherence to a consciousness that had begun fragmenting across dimensional boundaries. As he worked, Ben became increasingly aware of a fundamental choice approaching, one with profound implications for both of them. Charmcaster's dimensional dissolution had progressed too far for complete conventional restoration. Her consciousness remained intact, but her original dimensional frequency had become inaccessible, the connection to her home reality damaged beyond natural repair. The solution presented itself through the Void Omnitrix's unique capabilities, dimensional resonance synchronization. By aligning her frequency with his own, already altered by extended exposure to the device, Ben could create a compatible pathway back to their home dimension. The process would permanently alter her dimensional signature, binding it partially to his own unique frequency. The implications of this solution existed beyond verbal articulation, but in their current state of direct consciousness-to-consciousness connection, Charmcaster understood completely. This would create a permanent dimensional bond between them, a connection transcending conventional relationship categories. Her response came without hesitation, complete acceptance of both the solution and its profound implications. The resonance synchronization began, their dimensional signatures harmonizing across frequencies previously incompatible. The process changed both of them at fundamental levels, creating a shared resonance pattern unique in the multiverse. Their dimensional frequencies now harmonized, Ben activated the return sequence. The Void Omnitrix pulsed with accumulated energy as it traced the anchor signal maintained by their team back in the null void chamber. Reality reasserted itself in successive waves, first conceptual awareness, then energetic patterns, finally physical manifestation. They rematerialized in the chamber, which had been transformed into an impromptu dimensional laboratory during their absence. Equipment from multiple plumber divisions monitored the dimensional ripples created by Eon's defeated convergence circuit. The team worked in coordinated precision despite evident exhaustion, maintaining the anchor signal while stabilizing the surrounding reality. Ben and Charmcaster appeared within the carefully established containment field, physical forms reconstructing from multidimensional energy in a process that violated numerous laws of conventional physics. The Void Omnitrix pulsed with diminishing intensity as it completed the complex materialization sequence. Silence fell across the chamber as the team registered their return. Alina's monitoring equipment confirmed their successful dimensional reintegration, though with significant frequency modifications to both their baseline patterns. 3 days, Kai stated quietly, breaking the silence. You've been gone 3 days. Ben blinked in surprise, the transition back to linear temporal perception momentarily disorienting. It felt like hours and eternities simultaneously. Charmcaster completed, her voice carrying subtle harmonic undertones that hadn't existed before. Her appearance had changed subtly as well. Silver hair now intermixed with strands that shifted between violet and green depending on the angle of observation, eyes containing G-dimensional depth beyond normal human perception. Magister Tennyson approached cautiously, experienced enough with multiversal phenomena to recognize the profound transformation evident in both returned travelers. The dimensional reconfiguration has stabilized across all monitored realities. Eon's convergence circuit has been completely dismantled. But not without cost, Nyancy observed, her geometric eyes perceiving the fundamental changes in both Ben and Charmcaster. You're both dimension touched now, existing partially across multiple frequency ranges simultaneously. Alina's nanites completed a thorough scan, confirming this assessment. Your dimensional signatures have synchronized at a fundamental level. You're still individual entities, but your baseline frequencies are permanently interwoven. Like quantum entanglement but for entire beings, Luma added, scientific fascination momentarily overriding her usual stoic demeanor. Unprecedented in recorded multiversal interaction. Adia studied them with uncharacteristic thoughtfulness. So basically you're multidimensionally married. Congrats. I think. The observation might have seemed flippant from anyone else, but coming from Adia, it carried genuine acknowledgement of the profound connection established between them. Ben and Charmcaster exchanged glances, a look containing depths invisible to conventional perception. Tion but evident in the subtle dimensional ripples surrounding them. Something like that, Ben acknowledged quietly. The days that followed brought gradual adjustment to a new multiversal equilibrium. The dimensional breaches Eon had created were sealed permanently, reality boundaries reinforced through the natural harmonics established by the Void Omnitrix's reconfiguration. The device itself de-evolved once more, now less a tool attached to Ben's wrist and more an integrated aspect of his multidimensional existence. The team that had formed under crisis conditions found themselves reluctant to disperse completely. Though each had independent responsibilities and ambitions, their shared experience navigating multiversal chaos had created connections that transcended conventional association. Plummer Headquarters established a specialized dimensional oversight division with Magister Tennyson's blessing and Ben's informal leadership. Their mission: monitoring interdimensional stability and addressing threats that existed beyond conventional reality boundaries. Each team member contributed their unique expertise while maintaining their individual pursuits. Elena continued her nanite research, developing new applications for dimensional frequency detection and manipulation. Luma divided her time between diplomatic responsibilities for Koros and scientific analysis of gravitatio. Null constants across dimensional boundaries. Nyancy's enhanced perceptions made her invaluable for early detection of dimensional anomalies, though she maintained her independent nature and mysterious comings and goings. Kai integrated dimensional analysis into her archaeological methodologies, discovering previously undetected connections between ancient sites and multiversal convergence points throughout Earth's history. Adia, after officially receiving political asylum, established herself as a surprisingly effective liaison between Earth and various extraterrestrial governments interested in dimensional stability protocols. Even Corporal Sachs found purpose as the first official Incursine enrolled in Plummer Academy under the new Interdimensional Cooperation Initiative. Ben and Charmcaster navigated their unique situation with thoughtful consideration rather than conventional relationship definitions. Their dimensional synchronization created a connection beyond traditional parameters, a fundamental resonance that transcended physical proximity or emotional states. They existed partially in each other's perception regardless of distance, aware of each other's essential patterns across dimensional frequencies. 1 month after the dimensional reconfiguration, they stood together on the rooftop of Plummer Headquarters, watching a sunset whose colors shifted subtly across Dimensio. Null frequencies visible only to their enhanced perception. The Void Omnitrix pulsed with gentle regularity against Ben's wrist, now a comfortable extension of his multidimensional awareness. The OBS RVER Prime has been monitoring our dimension again, Charmcaster noted, perceiving patterns invisible to conventional detection systems. Her silver and shifting hair caught the dimensional undertones of the sunset, creating prismatic effects that defied conventional optics. Still cautious but no longer hostile, Ben nodded, having sensed the mathematical entity's dimensional signature himself. He natural reconfiguration pattern seems to have satisfied their primary directives. Stability without artificial constraints. Unlike Eon's approach, Charmcaster agreed. She hesitated briefly before continuing. Speaking of monitoring, have you sensed any trace of his dimensional signature? Even scattered fragments. Nothing definitive, Ben replied, though his expression suggested lingering concern. But his final words keep returning to me. Our conflict is eternal. Someone who exists across all timelines can't be permanently defeated in conventional terms. Perhaps not defeated, Charmcaster acknowledged, but balanced. Every force in the multiverse has its counter-resonance. Her hand found his, dimensional frequencies harmonizing at the point of contact. Including us. The simple gesture carried profound significance beyond its physical manifestation, a conscious choice to embrace their unprecedented connection rather than merely accept it as circumstantial necessity. Their dimensional synchronization had created possibilities neither could have anticipated, a relationship defined not by conventional parameters but by fundamental resonance across reality itself. As the sun descended below the horizon, dimensions shifted imperceptibly around them, reality settling into its new equilibrium with them as integral components rather than merely inhabitants. The Void Omnitrix pulsed with quiet affirmation. Its purpose evolved beyond transformation or even dimensional manipulation into something more fundamental: harmonization across the infinite possibilities of existence. The multiverse continued its eternal patterns, dimensions flowing alongside each other in natural rhythm rather than artificial convergence. And within this vast, complex tapestry of reality, two consciousness remained in perfect synchronization, distinct yet connected, individual yet harmonized, separate yet fundamentally one across all dimensional frequencies. A new equilibrium, not just for the multiverse, but for themselves as well. Blank. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.